Okay, we're gonna start streaming, so don't say anything bad about your neighbor. Okay, 7 o'clock, and I will call the February 4th, 2021 Salisbury Board of Selectmen regular meeting to order at 7 p.m. And if we could have the Pledge of Allegiance. So first, I'd just like to ask, before we get started, ask the Board of Selectmen to refrain from using any current or former employees' names during reports or discussions during the meeting. It's inappropriate if we could not use individuals' names. So first up is a presentation by Dan Colton, the Finance Director, and a report on allegations made by Selectman Harrison and Selectman Bertram of alleged cover-up by the current administration in regards to fuel tanks. Can you put that, Betsy, from George and Emily, the memo? So this memo was dated January 24th, 2021. So first thing I'd like to do is have Dan Colton come up and explain what he looked into with this and give us the presentation on this.
So hopefully everyone had a chance to review the report that I had sent out with the agenda. I know it was long, but if you haven't, I'll go over it again. I think that works. So when I started back in October of 2018, the fiscal office, as we went into it, was involved in the town audit, a lot of things going on. So we didn't get a chance to actually look into reconciling, small cities grants, gas and diesel tanks until late January, early February of 2019. When I went back to look to see if there was a reconciliation to the Veeder-Root system, I couldn't find anything as far as reconciling the tank balance, the accounting balance, to the Veeder-Root system. It was non-existent as far as I could tell. So what I did, I went back and took the July 1st, 2018 Veeder-Root starting balance, because that was what was actually in the tank, and walked forward an accounting reconciliation based on usage for the quarter. At the end of that reconciliation, it was discovered that we were short 949 gallons of gas and 416 gallons of diesel. So at that point, I had called up the Public Works Director and asked him, I said, these tanks are pretty old. If we're missing this much gas and diesel, could there possibly be a leak? So he went back and tested the tanks and came back to me and said, no, there's no leak. They did a stick test, and Matter of fact, we just had the tanks abandoned and the soil was clean, so there was no leak in the tanks. I also asked him at that point if there was any override keys. He told me that there were none, no override keys to the system. So we kept going through and looking at the reconciliation. I went to the IT director and I said, do you have any video of the fuel pump station? You know, the IT director told me at that point, we only kept video for 30 days. After that, it was recorded over. So we didn't have any video for that period from July 1st through December 31st, because we were already into February. So there was no video to check to see where it was. Also, because we started with not having a good starting balance with the reconciliation, there was no way to determine if the missing gas and diesel was for those 6 months, or 10 years prior, a year prior, or 20 years prior. So we had no good indication of, first of all, how it was missing, if it was pilfered by someone, or when that happened. So we had no indication of that. So what I did at that point, I talked to a few people and found out we actually had 2 override keys. I contacted the Public Works Director. I said, you know, I want those override keys in the fiscal office so we can lock them in the safe. About 3 days later, he came up to my office and said, actually, there were 3 override keys. He had one, the road foreman had one, and there was one in the garage. I took those keys and I locked them in the drawer in the fiscal office, and we started the reconciliation over from January 1st of 2019. From January 1st of 2019 through June 30th of 2020, so the 18 months, I believe the shortfall of gas was about 64 gallons in those 18 months, and diesel was a little more, maybe than 70 gallons. What we discovered in looking at all of these reconciliations, there was some, what I would call accounting anomalies, you know, one of which was if we ran the report any other period other than 4/59 on the first day of the following month, it didn't account for the last day's pumping. The other one was that when we got a delivery, especially in gas, the tanks shifted a little bit in the ground. So the trucks that would be delivering were metered. They were metering, saying we had 4,000 gallons delivered, but the Veeder-Root system was only picking up 3950. Sometimes they picked up 3920. So that was causing a discrepancy. I spoke to East River, who actually delivered the gas and diesel. We had a Public Works person stand with them while they metered the truck, and we figured out that was the case, that the Veeder-Root was not picking up the actual delivery amount. The third anomaly that we discovered, that if someone pumped gas or diesel while the delivery was being made, that pump never got recorded. It just didn't pick up in the accounting system. Don't know why, but it just didn't pick it up. So in looking at all of that, we figured that, you know, between January and June of 2020, January 2019 and June of 2020, we had about 55,000 gallons of each delivered. To be out only 48 and 60 gallons was probably a pretty good number. I actually called in Bloom Shapiro to take a look at this back in, I think it was March of 2019. They came in, they looked at it, they were made aware that we didn't have videotapes, we also didn't have a good reconciliation starting, going forward. They made some recommendations that we are now following. That report was reported to the Board of Finance in their June of 2019 meeting, so it was discussed in that meeting and it was reported to them. What we did discover moving forward, though, the new Veeder-Root system is totally controlled in the fiscal office. Prior to this, the Veeder-Root and the accounting system was all controlled in the Public Works office. So there was about 125 keys outstanding that we had no idea who had them. So that was almost every employee in town had a key to pump gas. So now we control in the fiscal office. A key does not go out without us signing off on it. Every key is registered to an employee and a truck. So no one can pump gas, and all those trucks are given a mileage. So no one can pump gas without putting in the truck, their key, and the odometer reading. And the odometer, the pump will cut off if they are not pumping when they're supposed to. So in my opinion, I would look at it and say, we may have had a problem, prior to January of 2019. We solved the problem by shutting down the gas and the keys. We took those and locked them in the safe. And now we're doing a weekly and monthly reconciliation just to make sure. So from what we can see, it looks like inventory-wise, we were at about $73 in gasoline and about $50 in diesel for 18 months.
And that could be attributed to,
When you look at these, it's funny, when you look at the Veeder-Root system, our old Veeder-Root system, sometimes when someone was pumping gas, it wouldn't pick up till a gallon was pumped. So we looked at it daily, and what we did is anything that was over 25, we kind of took as a weird difference. Most of the days you could see they were off by 1 gallon. And then the next day it was the other way, 1 gallon. So there was never really, from that point when we started looking at this really closely, there was never anything that I would say was out of the ordinary, or you could say someone was doing something they shouldn't have been doing up there.
in this, this memo from Selectman Bertram and Selectman Harrison, there's alleged that there is a cover-up, and obviously it's been out in social media that there is some sort of a cover-up and don't want to participate in this. Can you speak to the allegations of a cover-up?
Yeah, I don't think there was a cover-up at all. For there to be a cover-up, the fiscal office staff, myself, the IT director, the first selectman, and everyone that had a key would have to be involved in a cover-up. So I wouldn't say there was a cover-up in here. I think maybe we had bad controls prior to 2018 because we weren't doing a reconciliation, or what we were doing was not a proper reconciliation. I think since then, we're in great shape, but I wouldn't say that, no, the cover-up is not probably the right way to describe it.
So when this started, my understanding is that the auditors were looking at fuel as part of their routine audit. They pick a number of...
What the auditors did, when they came in, they pick, every year we give our internal audit, they come in and they give us 5 areas that they're going to focus on. When they came in that area, the auditor came to me and said, I want to focus on the procedures of gas and diesel. And I said to him, well, it's great to focus on the procedures, but I want to show you what actually we had. So I gave him the information that I had, that we had an anomaly that we were off by a certain amount. It was impossible at that point to determine what happened because we had no videotape and no actual starting or ending that we could tell when this happened. And if I look at it, over a 10-year period that those tanks were in the ground, we probably got 300,000 gallons of gasoline and 300,000 gallons of diesel delivered. So we're short 900 gallons. It's not a good thing, but it's not out of what you would think could be evaporation.
So they've been, to your knowledge, when was the last time that the reconciliation, to the degree of what the fiscal office did to look into this, which you started on your own to look into this? My understanding, I want to be clear about this. When you started looking into this, who knew about this when you first started?
When we first discovered this, the only people that knew were myself and the interim assistant treasurer.
Did you tell me?
Well, we did not. And the reason being because there were 125 keys out, and if something was going on, we didn't want to let anyone know that we were looking at it because it could have really been anyone. We had the volunteer ambulance had keys, the minibus drivers had keys, the fire department had keys, Public Works had keys, our assessor, building officials. So there were keys out there that I'm not even so sure that we can even account for all the keys that were handed out because we don't have records of who had all the keys. Now we do, but back then we didn't.
So you and the assistant treasurer at the time you never, I just wanted for the record to say that you did your job. You did your job very well. And even the first selectman, you were looking even at the fuel that I used.
Yeah, we looked at everyone because we weren't sure who could have been involved with this, and so we actually, we met with you, and myself and the interim assistant treasurer met with you. I believe it was in April, after the audit report was going to be released, because we knew we were going to discuss it at the Board of Finance, and at that point, the amount that was missing couldn't have been in the car that you were driving. It would have been impossible.
The Hyundai doesn't burn that much fuel. So as far as any cover-up discussions, and from you knew about it, the assistant treasurer at the time knew about it, then you told me about it. The auditors knew about what you were looking into. Was the audit report reported to the Board of Finance?
Yeah, the audit report was given to the Board of Finance, and it was actually discussed on the June 2019 meeting.
In
For the Board of
public?
Finance, in public, yes.
And the auditors were okay with what you had found and what?
Yeah, the auditors, when they looked at it, they would, what they had said, they would love to have had the videotape as well, and they would have loved to have had a good reconciliation to start with. But because we didn't have that, they made recommendations that we followed, pretty much all the recommendations that they made.
So to your knowledge, what you've told me is that to your knowledge, there was never any reconciliation of the fuel.
From what I could see, now, I can't say it wasn't done, but from what I could see in the fiscal office, we could not find a reconciliation to the Vita root system from the accounting system. It wasn't there. We can't find it.
So that would mean you would have to go back.
What we did was we took the Vita root system, which is what is actually in the tank as of July 1st. Now, if I went back 10 years, I might be able to figure out the month when this happened. And we could do that. It's just, I'm not so sure we have all the records to do it.
Okay.
My goal was to figure out if we're missing this much and there's no way of determining what happened, how do we stop it, and how do we stop it moving forward? And that's what we did in January of 2019.
And from what you found, that there could be a lot of different things that could have caused this.
There's a lot of different reasons. I mean, the last thing I want to do is come out and formally say, yes, someone was taking fuel. There's a lot of different reasons that could have happened as we looked at this thing. There was a lot of weird things with the system. It was an old system. One of the problems that I personally think was we bought a single licensed desktop version of the accounting system, and it was installed in a PC in Public Works. That should have been in fiscal office. So to get that moved to fiscal office, when I went to the IT director, he said, we can't do it, and what we're doing is we're going to get this new system anyway. So why don't we wait to get the new system and put that in fiscal? I wasn't happy with it, but I said, when we get this new system, I want to be involved in the picking of it and what we're going to do, and that's what happened. Now the whole accounting system, which is weird because the guy that installed the Vita root system this time said to us, this is generally never in fiscal, it's always held in Public Works. My opinion is it should be in fiscal because it's an accounting function.
So the fiscal office is reconciling.
We're reconciling it weekly. So just to make sure there's and we haven't had any real anomalies, especially with the new tanks because they're square, they're flat. We can get a tank reading, every hour if we wanted to. And it also accounts for evaporation. It gives us that formula. So we haven't done the January 31st reconciliation yet, only because the member of my staff is out on COVID protocol that does this, unfortunately. So as soon as she's back, we will have a January 31st reconciliation, and I will present that to everyone here so you could see that. I'm not expecting there's any differences because I looked at the tank level and I looked at what's in the accounting system, and it's spot on.
So one of the, what I heard in social media or saw in different places, that allegations of, that there was an erasure of video. I want to be clear about why this was set up on the original camera, and it was only 30 days. That was set up by the IT department at that time.
Yeah, when I went to the IT director and I said, I'd like to have the videotape to memorialize it and look back, he said, we only keep 30 days of video. And that's all we've ever kept. So we don't have any more than that.
And the current
Currently, I told him at that point, we need to keep at least 90 days, which we do now.
And because we're reconciling every week, if we see an anomaly,
Then we could go back and look at the video.
so I'll give an example of that. There is a waste oil furnace in the Public Works garage. And with all the heat, the cold weather we've had, they're currently running low on fuel, on waste oil. So they take, and what they do is they pump diesel fuel into the waste oil tank so the furnace will work. There's no auxiliary heat over there, which we're actually gonna put in so we don't do the waste oil, or if we run low on waste oil. So they called and they said they'd like to put 50 gallons, or I don't know the amount, into the waste oil. With that procedure, they have to notify us, send us an email or contact us, that there's, now when we see where there's, say, I don't know the number, but let's say 50 gallons, what was it pumped into? The fiscal office has an accounting of that 50 gallons, where prior to this, they may have done that, and it may not have been sent to the accounting department or for reconciliation, to reconcile these tanks, just because that's how they did it. They pumped, they put it into, could have been a waste oil tank. I know there's instances where there's, and back when this was happening, now, just so we all know, it wasn't just Public Works, but at the time, it was also the two ambulance companies.
Yeah, we had, there was over 100 keys that were distributed to the two ambulance companies, the fire department, town hall employees, Public Works. So there were keys outstanding. There were even keys for former employees that were never taken back that I'm not so sure at the time were ever canceled. But the example that you had just said, Jeff, for someone now to pump that, if someone from Public Works wanted to pump into an external tank, that external tank would have to be registered in the fiscal office on the system. So that tank, if it's a 20-gallon tank, we put in that they can only pump 20 gallons. If they want to pump more than 20 gallons in a period, they have to call us and we have to increase that to cover that, and they have to give us a reason why that happens. So, and that 20-gallon external tank is actually registered to a user as well. So the controls now are such that no one can pump anything into a vehicle without using their fob, without putting in the vehicle number and putting in the mileage or the amount that they're pumping, because everything, even our gas cans now are numbered. So a 5-gallon gas can is numbered and given the limit of 5 gallons. So if someone is going to pump into that, they pump 5 gallons today, tomorrow they go to pump 5 gallons, that pump will not work for them. They're going to have to call us and give us a reason why they want to pump another 5 gallons.
So even the first selectman is limited, my understanding, to 10 gallons a week or something.
That's for that car, yeah. That's what the limit is.
And if I drive, if I have reason to drive more than the mileage and I need to get more fuel for whatever reason, not only can I not just put my mileage in, but I'm gonna have to call for an override.
You're going to have to call our office and we're going to have to adjust in the system your car to accept more gas.
Even though my mileage justifies the gas.
Exactly.
So there's there's two checks on that.
Yes.
So
And
during,
that's not even me. That would go to the member of fiscal office staff and then they come to me. So there's actually a double level. So she can up your gas, but she can't do it without speaking to me. And I can't up your gas without her going in and doing it. So there's even a further layer of controls there.
so at one time when I first got into office, I'll also explain to the board, there were some vehicles that the police were driving that had, their odometers weren't working and their speedometers weren't working. In some of the old Crown Vics, they were due for replacement. The cost of replacing the odometers was pretty expensive. So at that time, the police would put fuel in and they would have to put some kind of a mileage number to get fuel because the odometers were not working. Could this account for some of the disparity?
I don't think so, only because they would have to still use their key and put a vehicle in. So that vehicle would be registered.
On the new system?
On the new system, it would never happen. On the old system, when they put their key in, they still had to put a vehicle in. that wouldn't, what happened, what I found out, what could happen, and I talked to many people that use these systems, is someone could, if they had the override key, they could lift the pump up and shut the pump down so they could pump without it registering. Now, believe it or not, we ran a report from January 1st through June 30th in the system, and there was nothing, because there is a report that could be run. We couldn't find anything. It was zero. There was nothing on there. So, and we went back and ran it from July 1st, and nothing registered. So the guy that installed the Vita root said this could have been many years ago. It could have been. He just didn't know. There was no way to figure out what it was without having a monthly reconciliation from the start of when these tanks were installed.
Okay. So I will say that the alleged cover-up, in the opinion of the town attorney, asking him to look at this, I can share that with everybody, but the town attorney opinion was that there was no cover-up. And that, is it the opinion of the auditors and the fiscal office that this is an accounting anomaly, that it's an anomaly of the Vita root system, the technology is...
The auditors didn't give an opinion on cover-up only because at that point we didn't think it was a cover-up, and I still don't think there was a cover-up here. Like I said, if there was a cover-up, there would have to be 3 people in my office that would have to be involved, including myself. And like I tell everyone, if someone in my office is willing to cover something up for me, then they shouldn't be working here or for me. So, and I would never cover something like this up for Jeff or whoever's in that job. I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't risk my professional reputation on it. So, as we looked at this, we did a reconciliation. We didn't do an investigation, and there definitely was not a cover-up as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And if anyone needs anything, I mean, anyone wants any of this documentation, it's in my office, so just let me know. I can get it to you.
Mr. Chairman, just on that point, as I'm listening to all this, it would seem to me that what the fiscal office did in this scenario was the opposite of a cover-up. You went to the auditors, you reviewed the systems, and then it was presented to the Board of Finance at a public meeting. And at that same public meeting, in the minutes that was circulated to all of us, the Board of Finance passed a resolution that night after this discussion commending you for your service to the town during your period of time that you were employed since October. Do I have that?
Yeah, that was,
Right.
but there was a lot of things that were involved in that, so it wasn't just this. There was a,
No, I'm just,
yeah.
time-wise.
Yep, no, that's accurate.
So this memo came from George and Emily. Emily, do you have any questions on this?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, anytime there's any public claim of impropriety, it's something that we have to, as a board, take very seriously.
I agree.
Absolutely. And that's where George and I first and foremost come with this and say, we need to get to the bottom of it. We want to hear all the details. I wasn't on the board at this time, so it's very hard for me to go back and say, this happened or that happened, because there's no knowledge for me, so I have no starting point. I do have some questions, though, on timeline, and I know, I guess some of it I'm just maybe not following fully, so bear with me. When did you go to the IT director and ask for the surveillance?
We went in
tapes?
February after we reconciled the first 2 quarters,
February of 2019.
19.
So at that point.
We didn't start our reconciliation until after the first of the year, because when I came into the job, we didn't really have anyone in my role for a number of months. And the auditors were in the middle of the audit, and they had a bunch of questions, and I was new to municipal accounting, so I was learning from them what we had to do. So that audit finished January 4th. We released the financials late that year, unfortunately. But at the same time, we started our budget in December. So that was also my first municipal budget. So by the time we got through that and I got to this, it was already, I wish I would have gotten it in December, because then I would have at least had November and December tape. But I didn't. I didn't start it until February. So unfortunately, it wasn't there.
No, appreciate that. And I appreciate everything that you've done. I think you're doing a stellar job, and I appreciate all the measures you've put in place, that it sounds like things are leveling out, which is good. So in February of 2019, based on the audit report, there was discrepancies that would have even gone back into January or even part of
Yeah,
December.
one of the reasons we found the accounting anomaly, they had 100 gallons in January, but that's when I discovered that, because what I did was I dumped the report, all these reports into Excel, and the Excel didn't match the accounting report, and I realized it was the last day, and it was 92 gallons on the last day of pumping.
Mhm.
So that's why it was actually only 12 gallons instead of 100.
So but in February, I mean, obviously you suspect something. You're looking into this, auditors are looking into this. Were you able to get the 30 days of footage at that point? Did you
We
look
got
at that?
January 1st, and there was nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing.
And what point did you inform the first selectman
It
of what
was-
was going on and that there was potential of impropriety?
We met with the first
That I
selectman
would-
in,
Question whether that's an accurate statement.
well, we met with the first selectman in, I think it was March, I don't know the exact date, when I knew the audit report was gonna come out, because I was still unsure what we had or what we were looking at. And I met with him just to let him know that, hey, we're gonna have an audit report, and it's gonna show that gas and diesel are missing. And I even told him in that meeting, and so did the interim assistant treasurer, that we didn't tell you because guess what, you were a suspect.
Sure.
So, you know, that's why we told him. And then because we had nothing to go on, videotape or reconciliation wise, we told him because it was gonna come out, and I didn't want it to just be out there and have him not be aware of it.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. And I know you said, and I say, potential for impropriety, you said yourself, we may have a problem here. You
Yep.
really don't know what's going on. Sure, there's some anomalies, but maybe that doesn't account for everything. And at any point, was this brought to the Board of Selectmen? Was it brought to the town attorney?
No.
Or were the police called in to
No,
handle an
and
independent
For
investigation?
the same reason that we didn't tell the first selectman, every police officer had a key as well.
But when the first selectman was notified, why weren't any of those
Because
members?
we didn't have video, and we didn't have a good I couldn't give them anything. If they came and asked me, when did this happen, I'd have to say, I have no idea. It could have been 2001. I don't know. It wasn't reconciled.
So from July to September, and there's nearly 500 gallons that are missing. And
There's
then
actually
again from
900.
485 from July 1st, 2018 to September 30th, 2018. And then October to December, 493. So roughly another 500 gallons. And
Yep.
that's reconciled.
Well, that's not, because the opening balance is not a good opening balance, so it's not reconciled. If I could go back and start from 2001, I could give you a definite reconciliation.
Okay.
So it was not an accurate reconciliation of the amount of fuel? that
No,
was in
my
it?
opening balance was what was in the tank, so it'd be like doing a bank reconciliation and taking the bank balance, and that's my start, not my book balance. So the balances were not right because we never did a reconciliation.
But at the end of September 30th, it was reconciled then?
It was, the September 30th reconciliation still had not a good opening, and neither did the one for September 30th, because we were still using the July 1st opening balance.
Okay.
And I would love to have, Emily, I would have loved to have had a tape, and I would love to have done it, but unfortunately, we didn't have it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree.
And if I had that, and I had the date that it would have happened, I would have notified the police department, without a doubt. But we had nothing. What we did know is we had to stop whatever it was, and I think we've done that.
Was the Board of Selectmen, I know this was brought to the Board of Finance, was the Board of Selectmen ever notified of this problem?
They were not.
Okay.
And why, I think the insinuation here is that it should have been brought to the Board of Selectmen. But what you found was there was no, the system was accurate once it was reconciled.
Once we discovered, yes, it was accurate. Now, I went to the Board of Finance. Should I have gone to the Board of Selectmen? Probably, but unfortunately, I didn't.
But it was a public record, and we had no
Yeah.
indication.
We had no
any-
indication of any theft or anything at that
any
point,
theft.
no.
If we had an indication, and I think what Selectman Harrison is alluding to, that this was kept from the board, how often would I poke my head in and ask, have you found anything?
Yeah,
Is there
once
anything I
we
should be-"
met with you, you would ask me on probably a weekly basis, and there was, same thing I told you, there was no videotape, and we don't know what unfortunately, the reconciliation was
And
not
we don't
done.
know when this possibly could have,
No, we could go back and try and figure it out. We'd have to go back to when that Vita root system and the accounting system was put in, and see if we could do it. But I'm not so sure if it would be worth it for the amount of gas and diesel that's missing, considering we had the amount that was delivered. And considering now we have a pretty good handle on it, and obviously there's nothing that has been taken.
so there really wasn't anything to bring forward.
No, but I agree with Emily, and that's on me, that I probably should have scheduled a meeting and come and met with you guys. But I didn't think there was anything here because we had it solved as far as I was concerned from January moving forward. And the past, since we didn't have any good information, I wouldn't have been able to give you anything anyway. I would just given you exactly what I have here as an accounting anomaly. That's all I have.
Yeah, I think I don't need anyone to, assume what I'm thinking here. I think that is concerning to me when we look at it, and I always think, 2 heads are better than 1, 6 heads are better than 1. Certainly from that perspective, if there's a chance that you were looking into something that you said, yeah, we had a problem here, from the town perspective, this is the governing body, and perhaps it should have been brought to the board, different conclusions or investigative ideas perhaps could have been made. I think that's a disappointing part for me. I wasn't even a part of the board at that time, so it's not like I could have done anything differently. But that is a concern to me.
No, but I agree with you, Emily, and moving forward, this will be brought to the board,
Yeah.
regardless, because I brought it to the Board of Finance because they are the fiscal arm of this, so that's why I brought it to them, but in reality, it should have come to you guys as well, and that I apologize for.
Well, the Board of Selectmen is recognized in Section 310A of our charter as the town government's official investigative body. And when all this stuff started coming out, and Emily and I started hearing different pieces and putting the pieces of the puzzle together, it didn't look good. Now, we didn't have all the facts that you have, obviously, but if it had come to us earlier, we'd be part of it, and none of this would have.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you guys, and the reason why I did it is because
We were not in the loop. We were
I
not
didn't,
out of the loop.
and I agree with you, and I didn't intentionally keep you out of the loop, George. It's just I didn't think there was
Well,
anything here.
It's not your job to do that,
You know.
frankly, but, it's.
No, but as a finance director, I messed up on this one because we should have kept you in the loop, and unfortunately, I went to the Board of Finance and not the Board of Selectmen.
I think the other concern that I have too, in what you're saying, is that you met with, I believe you said the head of Public Works. You asked if there was any override keys, said no override keys are available.
That's my biggest concern, is that when I asked if there was an override key, and then 2 weeks he came back with 3 override keys.
And not just 3, but saying 1 he personally had.
And-
You know,
And in
those are-
reality, I have no idea. There could be 5 override keys. We have no idea. No one kept any records of the keys, what was
Mhm.
given out.
But he had 1 personally, said that there aren't any, now 3 show up, we don't even know how many there are. Was any action taken about that and what happened there?
No, once I had the keys in my hand, that there was nothing that could have been done from that point, so no.
Mhm. I think the other thing, for me as well, is this has come out and been public. I've had private citizens call me, notify me that they're aware of theft of fuel dating back to even 2009. So I don't know if there's a way, and I think it's, again, I go back to it, it's disappointing we don't have the surveillance. I think that's kind of where things begin or end. But I think for me, when I look at it and say, this is where we have police, they're accustomed to investigative processes. It's more than just surveillance. We could talk to people, certainly, and have that investigation in a different route. There was other ways that this could have gone as far as an investigation is concerned. And that troubles me for the citizens of the town, that this has potentially been going on for over a decade.
Yeah, I've heard,
Way before your time.
I've heard those rumors also, and what I could see from here, a lot of those rumors aren't factually correct, because we're not short the amount that people are saying that was taken.
I'm not saying huge amounts. I'm saying people had known of, oh, well, I felt like I was owed this, so I went and filled up my tank once, or I
Yeah.
did this, or I consistently did that. I don't think that's anything that we would see as a 500, 1,000-gallon, 2,000-gallon discrepancy, but definitely anomalies that existed. That's what makes me concerned, is that if this was going on for over a decade, people certainly have probably felt like they're getting away with it. You get a little, more emboldened to continue to do that. It sounds like we certainly have the measures in place now, but I don't know if it's worth it. I still wonder if we go back and say, is it worth it to have that investigation? And potentially just maybe the sheer fact to have kind of more of an after-action report to determine where things maybe could have been handled a little differently. We certainly have identified that there are some areas where things potentially have gone wrong. Just to say, just as we've developed new policies at Public Works with the fuel tanks and how to get it to come out, but if instances like this happen again, how should it really be properly handled? And in other ways, beyond maybe just the Board of Selectmen being notified.
So just for the record, again, George, you're citing something here, but in fact, if the fiscal office can do is allowed to do an investigation, empowered, the Board of Finance can do an investigation into, if they want to do that. The Selectman's office can look into investigate if I choose that, or feel that there is a need to. And yes, the Board of Selectmen can also. I have talked to our town attorney, and he said to me, that's what he said to me about, it's not just the Board of Selectmen that can officially do an investigation. The Board of Finance can do it, the fiscal office can do it, and the first selectman can also do an investigation if they feel that's necessary. As far as what bringing to the Board of Selectmen, we never found anything in this fiscal investigation or look into or trying to square up this fuel tank. There was never anything brought to me that warranted any investigation because they were accounting anomalies. Our auditors looked at it, and if the auditors were at all concerned about any improprieties or something illegal or a need to go further, I think is my assumption that am I assuming that the auditors would also say you need to bring in more investigation because there's something that could be here? And the Board of Finance also agreed with what you had seen. So if you are looking at this because it wasn't brought to the Board of Selectmen, there was in fact nothing to bring to the Board of Selectmen because there was no smoking gun, there was no anything there to accuse anybody of or bring to the police because there were too many reasons of what could have happened and the length of time, over time, how long this was allowed not reconciled.
Yeah, and if you go back and look, if we went back and reconciled 10 years, there may have been a month in those 10 years where they ran the report not at 4:59 on the last day of the month. So that month, they may not have been captured, so that could be part of the issue. If the board wants, the fiscal office, it'll take some time, but we can try and put something together for the last 10 years and see if we can come up with a timeline.
Okay, but I know we keep hearing the thing, this was accounting anomalies. Can we guarantee that this was exclusively accounting anomalies?
I can't guarantee that, Emily, no, sorry. I wouldn't say that. Just like I wouldn't say I can guarantee that someone was helping themselves to gas and diesel because I have no proof.
But we can't disprove either,
We can't.
or prove either,
No.
unfortunately.
Not without videotape and not without a proper reconciliation.
And I think that's where I look at the auditor's report and they're saying, it's definitely not a leak in the tank, but without surveillance, and you need to look at the surveillance, we can't tell you if it's an accounting anomaly, we can't tell you if it's theft, we can't tell you what it is, but you have some concerns here.
Yep.
And we've got to put some new practices in place, and since that point in time,
That's what we've done. We've
Fine.
actually, prior to them even coming in, we put the things in place, so.
George, you have any questions?
Oh, I have more than a few. I don't know if I'll get to them. Yeah, I have a few questions. first of all, the Bloom-Shapiro report, which I've read a few times, does indicate that they were very, very concerned about theft. They don't use the word theft, but they talk about unauthorized users. Their draft report entitled Internal Audit Report 2018-19, Section 4 of the report is entitled Public Works Gas Pump Controls Assessment, and it does reveal some troubling information. The report stated substantial differences were identified in the evaluation of gas pump purchased versus gas used and the amount of gas that should be available in the gas tank. The Bloom-Shapiro report also contains 6 recommendations. All of those recommendations, each single one was targeted at eliminating unauthorized fuel usage. Their final recommendation was consider reviewing the videos produced by the surveillance system to identify unauthorized users. So here I am reading this thing thinking, well, these guys are, they're concerned about it, and you're concerned about it. It was abundantly clear from their report that users were suspected of stealing gas. They're experienced auditors, and their opinions should be taken seriously, and I know you do. They also mentioned that no reconciliation of gas usage had been performed before October 2018, and you've said the same thing. So that leads me to think that gas usage had gone unchecked for perhaps decades, so we don't really know. I mean, that's the way I read it, is that we have no idea if gas was being, pilfered away by somebody. Maybe that's wrong.
That's correct, George. We really have no idea.
We just don't know.
We just don't know, because we don't have a Vita route to accounting system reconciliation,
that's
unfortunately. I
not
wish we
your
did,
fault.
but we don't.
I'm not being critical of you at all.
No, I don't think you are, but you're correct. We just don't have any indication of what it was.
This came about because of Southbury residents expressing concerns about reports of fuel loss. And then combined with that, we had a sudden, unprecedented, and mostly unexpected resignation of 4 key Department of Public Works employees in less than a month. So everybody's like, what's going on here? So naturally, residents are concerned, and maybe these developments are connected in some way. One result of that, I call it a public outcry, was that Selectman Harrison and I called for a special BOS meeting to review the situation, and that's basically what this was. We're not accusing anybody of anything, but it's just, it seemed appropriate based on what people were saying on Facebook and other places, that we do something and have an investigation, or at least a meeting to talk about it. Not willing to pass judgment on anyone without proof, but I'm also reluctant to be involved in what could be a cover-up, and Selectman Harrison and I knew too much at that point to comfortably remain silent on the matter. So we talked about the numbers. I don't need to go through those again. We don't even know if they're accurate, so but it does appear like there was fuel loss. And if you do read the Bloom-Shapiro report, it indicates that they were concerned about it, and they were clearly concerned about unauthorized fuel usage.
And I think the fiscal office, we were concerned with that as well. We just couldn't figure out what the situation was.
Another issue that came up in the numbers is that there was a sudden decline in Q3, roughly 64% from the previous 2 quarters. So the first quarter, Q1, it was about 485. Q2, there was a loss of 493. And regardless of whether these numbers are accurate, that's what I see on the papers.
Q3, George, was actually more than that. It was almost 100% difference, because when we started January 1st, which started Q3, I believe the gas was only short 12 gallons. It was actually over 12 gallons. The accounting system was saying we have 12 gallons in the tanks more than we should have.
In Q3?
In Q3.
Oh, so the 177 loss
No,
here.
if you see the report, I put the reconciliation report in there, and it shows 12, there's about 12 gallons more in there, and that was part of the, when I looked at it, I said, wait, we can't have more, that's impossible. So as we went back, we realized that was the delivery issue.
But Emily and I, looking at it, we're saying, well, geez, you notified people that you were going to start a reconciliation in Q3. So it would be kind of reasonable to assume that people, if they were pilfering gas, if they're notified that they're being watched, that they're going to stop. And then if the Q3 number dropped, it sort of indicates that something was going on. And that's, we don't have all your information, but that's
Yep.
what we saw, and that's kind of what raised our level of concern.
And that also, you know, if you put together that we took away all the override keys and locked them in the safe. So,
And I think that's the part for me where I get stuck on, we're saying this is an accounting anomaly, yet in Q3, we're notified, we're gonna do reconciliations, and all of a sudden it was 500, oh, less than 200. So
well, I only
it
say
seems
it.
suspect.
Yeah, I only say an accounting anomaly because I don't know what it was. I wish I did,
I
but I
think
don't.
when you say accounting anomaly, what you're saying is, we just don't know what happened, but the numbers just aren't adding up, but we can't prove one thing one way or another.
Yeah, now I can show accounting anomalies from January 1st going forward because I have proof of all that stuff because I reconciled them. But back prior to that, no.
Yeah.
And not to say those same anomalies didn't happen in prior, we just don't know.
So anyway, beyond what we saw there, I received a call from a longtime town resident after the concerns became public. There was some Facebook post, and I'm not on Facebook currently, so I don't see it, but somebody did send me a link, well, not a link, but a snip of it, so I did get to look at it anyway. I did get a call from a town resident, and the individual relayed a story about 2 volunteer organization members who regularly use town fuel for their private vehicles. And the events this resident described took place back in 2009. Now, I have no idea if this is true or credible, or it's really just hearsay, but, I get a call like that, I'm thinking,
No,
geez.
I agree. And if you could send that information to me, I would certainly love to have someone look at it. I don't have that information. Had I had it, I would have certainly forwarded it to the PD.
Well, that's the reason why we wanted to have this
Yep.
meeting, so we could talk about these things. The individual, this resident, did give me names. His allegations were credible. I mean, he just seemed to know what he was talking about, and he was very unreluctant to give me the information. I did call a former selectman, I won't mention any names, and it was revealed that this selectman met with the first selectman, not Jeff, this was a previous first selectman, to report that Department of Public Works employees were indeed taking town fuel for their vehicles. And this meeting occurred, I'll say roughly 10 years ago. It's not exactly, I'm not gonna, if I tell you the time, then you'll know the names, but I don't wanna do that. According to this former selectman, the practice of taking fuel was common knowledge in certain circles. He had no specific details, at least he didn't tell me. So, I mean, this is some of the background that we have that kind of led to this.
Yep. And I wish I had all that information when we were going through this as well, but I didn't have any of that information.
Yeah, I think this is why where I go back to and say the 6 heads are better than one comment on the Board of Selectmen being notified, because if everyone had been notified of a potential concern, people, there's chatter, oh my gosh, I heard this, I had no idea, maybe this was related to that, and we could have looked into this a lot sooner.
Yeah, the only issue would be if it was 2009 and it was 2018, do we go back and investigate 2000? We may not even have had the accounting system in place to do that.
No, I mean more from the standpoint of if you knew in, January, February, a point prior to notifying that there was going to be a reconciliation, if the Board of Selectmen was notified and, someone had heard something to that effect, we could have said, hey, don't tell them yet. We really should continue with the surveillance and watch this so that we can understand. And this is where I go back to having the independent investigation, bringing people in who are experts in investigation, and maybe the board at that point in time could have made that judgment call, which is where I say, and I'm sorry, George, that after action report and how do we handle this going forward is just so critical to me.
Yep. And I don't disagree with you, Emily. Like I say, at that point, I went to the Board of Finance, and we probably should have had a meeting with you guys as well. So that I apologize for that.
But it was public.
But it wasn't intentionally kept from the Board of Selectmen, that's for sure. It was just when we were looking at it, I looked at it from the point that from January 1st, the issue stopped, and it stopped moving forward. And I couldn't determine what happened in the past, so I didn't want to come and give you guys, or give anyone, hey, this is what I think it is. Unless I had concrete proof, I didn't want to do anything about it.
The
And there
report
was
in question from Bloom Shapiro, yeah, it was technically public information, but it was released as a meeting material from a Board of Finance meeting, and they have a lot of meeting
Well,
materials.
we actually discussed the report, though, and there's a member of the Board
I
of...
missed that whole thing. I
There's a
didn't see
member
it.
of the Board of Finance that actually expressed the same concern that you guys expressed. He said, for years, we've been hearing about it, but there was no way without having video and a reconciliation to go back and look at it.
That's what's frustrating to me, is because, like you say, for years, people have been hearing about it. I've been hearing about this problem for years, and finally, we had an opportunity to maybe figure out what's going on, and it was lost. For not blaming you at all, I'm just saying it, you know, it's frustrating and makes me angry to think that finally we had a shot at this, and we lost it.
But there is no clear, that there's other reasons why the fuel could be missing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
And
I
I'll
don't,
caution-
I don't know. It could, you know, it very well could be everything, the rumors that are out there. It could be that the system, we don't know. We just don't know.
And that's my standpoint. It's unfortunate that we don't know. I think it sounds like, George, you had been hearing this rumors. If you knew that that finance office and that the auditors were looking into theft of fuel, you would have.
My hair would have gone on fire. I've been hearing about this for years before even I got on this board. I mean, this is something that it's somewhat common knowledge among a lot of people in town, and it's an unfortunate allegation, and hopefully none of it's true. But when you hear this stuff, and
But
then
it sounds like too
finally,
many people are hearing this, and that's what I'm concerned about, and
So the question-
The only problem I have is a lot of people have been hearing about it, but no one has brought to the fiscal office attention that this is happening. Like, I don't have the names that you guys have that people are saying that could have done it. Because had we had that information and going back and saying we're short, we could have said, oh, look, this is what we have. We could have, but no one has come to us.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it is unfortunate until it was kind of, you know, publicized. I didn't get those phone calls. I didn't know. I didn't have those names. And that goes back to my point of to George and saying, if it had been brought to the board, he would have been able to say at that time, oh, I've heard about this. I have more information. I can go and find some more details potentially. And even beyond that, which, because I will say, I don't think that would have been the right way to handle it. I would have been, hey, we're hearing these rumors and we need to call in an independent investigator. George, provide that detail to them and let them run with that investigation.
Yep.
So,
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
who's that? Jeff Tinley?
Yes. I just want to point out one other thing. I think Dan is being very forthright here to take responsibility for whether this was reported directly to the Board of Selectmen or not. But I'd also point out that the William Shapiro was engaged by the town as auditors and was specifically engaged in this instance to do a special audit report, and should have been delivered to the town, meaning to the first selectman and the Board of Selectmen, not just the Board of Finance. And then if that had happened in 2019, we wouldn't have this terminal that we have today. So when Shapiro
good
does this
point.
kind of report, they should understand that it should be delivered to not only the Board of Finance, but to first selectman and the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, there's two other selectmen out there, Justin or Mike. Do you have questions of,
Mr. Chairman, it's Mike. I don't have questions, but I do have a comment. One, I want to thank our finance director, Dan Colton, for taking accountability and being so forthright, as Council Tinley said. But I also want to apologize to Dan, and I also want to apologize to the first selectman. On behalf of the town and the board, I think this is a case. There's no question that this is a serious potential issue, and that everything spoken here is true and is good feedback. But I also think that what led up to this was, as someone smart once said, a fire-ready aim approach to looking into this matter, rather than a reasoned approach to look. There was, and I can, I have the emails, I've seen the memo. There was an allegation made here, not only that there may have been criminal activity regarding the theft of gas, but there was an allegation of a cover-up by the first selectman and his office. And to me, I felt like that was getting way out over our skis, that, you deserve the right to have this conversation and for Dan to present the facts as he saw them and knew them and presented them to the Board of Finance. And I also do want to say, I too am not on, while I am on social media, I'm not on the page where I believe this, the rumor and speculation started. Like Selectman Bertram, it was a screenshot of it was sent to me. But what I would say is we have to be careful of our sources. And our finance director is a very reliable, credible, truthful source, and has been since the day he joined us, and has had to put up with, this is not the first time he's had to put up with these types of this type of innuendo that's been fueled by social media rumors. And the source of that one post I saw was not a credible source in any way, shape, or form. It was a source that has a history of sharing false, malicious information meant to simply stir the pot. That's what this person who operates under a pseudonym seems to enjoy. Some would use the word troll. We all know that word now. We never knew that word. It was a totally different meaning when we were kids. So I just think it's important that we be really serious about these. And I don't doubt that Selectman Bertram and Selectman Harrison were meant to take this seriously. But I think it does show that we have to be careful and respectful of each other and not assume the guilt. There had been, at this point, 2 weeks ago, no evidence of any malfeasance presented to us other than rumors. And if any of us on the Board of Selectmen had heard rumors of theft, we have a responsibility, actually. I had never heard of those rumors. But if anyone had heard of those rumors, we have a responsibility to the residents of this town under the oath we take to bring that to bear, to bring it to the first selectman's office, to bring it to the finance office. If we have concerns that there may be wrongdoing, to do it as a whistleblower. There are opportunities and options presented to us to ensure that we can do right and protect the people here. But I just want to make sure we're always trying to do this in the most respectful way possible. And I'm glad we've had a chance to hear the facts. And I appreciate, Dan, especially you take the time to inform us of the history and the context.
Thank you. Justin, are you there, Justin? Is there anything?
Yeah, I'm here. I have nothing else to add. I mean, we spent a lot of time on this. We have a lot more on our agenda tonight. I thank Dan, as always, for his, concise and complete reporting on the issue. I don't accept the idea that Dan has any culpability for anything that happened in this. We all know that he stepped into a hornet's nest when he came into the job, and he's done nothing but fabulous work for the town. And I think we should, obviously have systems in place, but it sounds like we do have them now. And, I think we should move forward.
Okay. Jason, you have not spoken. Is there anything?
I just had, going back to one of the questions asked earlier, I mean, you've answered pretty much most of my questions. I've read all the reports, and it's all thorough and helpful. There was this discussion about cameras, and I just wanted to clarify something. These cameras that are deleted within 30 days, is that at the time, was that an automatic operation that they were re-recorded over during that
Yes.
time, or was it an affirmative?
No, it was an automatic. They were just recorded over.
Okay. So at the time that you went and asked for the tapes,
They've already been recorded over, unfortunately.
Okay. So a couple things. One, I'd like to thank you for your response to Selectman Harrison, acknowledging, perhaps should have come to this board. But as the finance director, I fully understand the process you took, which is the normal process for our yearly audits. And going to the Board of Finance, the point I was making earlier was looking at the timeline, and what concerned me about a lot of the things that have been said and a lot of the allegations is looking at everything that's happened. You actually identified the issue, looked into the issue, got the auditors involved in the issue, went to the Board of Finance, discussed the issue with them, and fixed the issue. So as a selectman of the town, I want to thank you for your service to the town and commend you for the job that you've done as our fiscal director, which has been remarkable over the last couple of years. And I have a concern at the way this matter was ultimately brought to this board, because when allegations are made rather than questions asked, it hurts a lot of people along the way. And I'm sure that people in your office felt reverberations of this over the last couple of weeks, unnecessarily so, because they're hardworking town employees who have done a good job. And I'm hopeful in the future that we ask questions, do research, gather facts before allegations are made. And if those facts that we develop, if they lead in a conclusion that would lead to an allegation, then we take appropriate steps and appropriate action, and ordinarily discuss those things in executive session first. So there's a process that I'm hoping that this board would take going forward. But I'd like to just thank you for dealing with this, for dealing with what you've likely had to deal with the last couple of weeks, for presenting the way you presented tonight, for being extremely, as Jeff Tinley said, forthright and honest in your responses. And I just thank you for your service to the town.
Thank you.
So, one thing I want to say here before we close this presentation out and get on with other business. I want to remind the board that when there's rumors and allegations and posting on Facebook and people out there accusing employees, public work employees, I've worked with these guys. I'm going to tell you that I was in the fire department for almost 20 years. And during those 20 years, I had never heard of any allegations of any fuel, never heard anything about this. Maybe I was in the wrong group. I don't know. I got along pretty well with everybody. But I also, if my memory goes back far enough in the fire department, even the chair of the Board of Finance was a member of the Southbury Volunteer Fire Department. So as these rumors come out, I want to remind the board that the dedication of our public works employees, if you couldn't see it in this last snowstorm and what they did for this town, and what was an extreme snowstorm. Before I make allegations of improprieties in a department, I want to make darn well sure that before I speak about that or make allegations or call big investigations, that I have some kind of a proof in hand to some degree that I can make a direct implication to what or who it may be. These people have performed incredibly well in the last snowstorm in keeping our roads open and clear. And when you look back at the anomalies or the questions, there could be someone, if it was, who's no longer even employed for the town, by the town of Southbury, and frankly, they may not even be alive. So I caution this, how we speak about allegations and public works and sizing up because the tanks are at public works, that it seems to be through rumors that it's someone in public works. There's a lot of other explanations. We can get into bigger and bigger details. I would even say that one time in my own vehicle, I was not able to get my fob to get fuel to work, and an employee came over and overrode it so that I could get my fuel. Now, is that theft or is that helping? And should that have been, or could it have been reported to the fiscal office or to wherever? Yes. Today, what happens is we make sure the fiscal office is made aware of it, so they can make the proper reconciliation for that. But again, that could explain some of the fuel that is showing up, that does not show up on the system. So there's many different scenarios that could have led to this, and rumors and accusations and people in departments, and without any video so you can find it, virtually impossible to do that. So if there's any final questions,
Oh, I have comments. Emily and I wrote a very simple letter requesting that we have a special meeting. We were hoping it would be maybe an executive session. It is not us who are bringing all this into the public domain. Emily and I are not the ones who made the call to do this meeting in this forum. So don't go blaming me for that. That's on you, sir. And that's all I have to say.
One
Well-
last question. Attorney Tinley has said that, you know, the audit report, and Dan, truly, I think you're doing a bang-up job. I don't think you did anything wrong here. But Attorney Tinley's saying, you know, the audit report should have came to the Board of Selectmen. You're saying you think that there's benefit to kind of that after action, let's look at the processes and having that. I think there's benefit to that being done independently. How would you recommend we go about that? And what would that look like for us?
What I'll do in the future is I'll make sure that that Bloom Shapiro report comes to you guys before it goes to the Board of Finance.
Is there a way, though, that we can go back and have that independent look as to the timeline of
We,
everything?
we can call
and-
in the auditors again to take a deeper dive into it.
Mhm. I think there's a benefit to the town, to the taxpayers, when we're saying that there's all of these rumors. I think that there's more information now than there perhaps was, and we do need to take a deeper dive into this and how everything rolled out. I think there is a benefit for the town to do that.
The only thing I would ask is if we do it after the budget.
Totally fine. Yeah, I don't think anything's changing from 2009
No, because now
to
we
2018
have a good handle or a good control system from January 2018. So yeah, I would only ask that we wait till after we complete the budget and get that out, and then we can have them come in.
Yeah,
Can we get an estimate from them of what the cost of that?
Absolutely,
project
I
would
can
be?
call them tomorrow and get it.
I just think we should have that information, because my understanding is the discrepancy that wasn't reconciled was 1,400 gallons in total.
That's the total, yeah.
And what was the price?
At that time, the spot price of gas was $1.89, and I think the spot price on diesel might have been $2.05. So it was about $800 in diesel and about $1,700 in gas.
Okay.
So-
I just think we should, if it's a $20,000 effort, we should have a discussion before we do that. We may decide to still do it for various reasons, but I think we should know what that cost is.
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
The other thing I would caution is us using phrases like all these rumors. I haven't heard that many rumors. I've seen it mainly in one spot. So I think we need to be, again, cautious about is it hundreds of people talking about it? I haven't heard from hundreds of people. So I just think, but I think Jason's point, Selectman Bucksbaum's point is correct. Let's find out what the cost of this investigation would be before we went and spent taxpayer money on it, because it needs, I think we do want to know what happens, but there needs to be a degree of sensibility simply in this.
so the total cost of what seems to be the accounting anomaly, we can't pinpoint what, we're not gonna say missing, because it very well, as we have said here, there's instances where it could have been used, and I gave an example where the new system where fuel is used to fuel something up, and only because of what we've put in place, it was not theft, it was to fill a furnace for heat, because we used up the waste oil. It's again, this is an explanation of what could have led to 50 gallons here that fueled up, because this, I do know that's not the only time in the past, since the waste oil burner only holds a certain amount of fuel, of waste oil, is assuredly in the past, they have filled that with fuel oil and may not have been accounted for in a note or a message, and it wasn't theft. It was in fact put into the furnace, the waste oil furnace, because it was getting low, but not charged to a vehicle. It may have been missed. That fuel will be missing, considered missing, if it wasn't accounted for by calling the fiscal office.
Yeah, if someone did that, they would have to override the pump at that point. and
Today they would.
Yeah, and we would be aware of that, but in the past, we wouldn't have unless they actually came and told us. And like I said, I wasn't here at the time, so I don't know what the procedures were at that point. And
So there's
not to say that, I'm not trying to put this on anyone else, but it's just, if it was prior to 2018, I'm sorry, I just don't have any information for there.
So if Bloom and Shapiro were to, if we were to go into looking into a deeper dive into this, what I'm hearing from you is there, and what I have seen myself, and I'll say it, there became many reasons why there was fuel that may not have been accounted for properly, but not theft.
If that's the case, they would put that in their report, but I like I said, I don't know until they actually did it and did the review. But what I can see from when we did it, that there was some weird things that happened in the accounting system. Prior to that, I don't know.
What I'm talking about though too is more than just looking at the numbers and the accounting. It was how we got here, how the board wasn't notified, how those various measures that we should be looking at in totality to say, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. Yeah, and I don't know if the auditors can go fully into that or not, and that's why I asked that question.
I will certainly find that, Emily, and I actually agree with you. I think it'd be a good idea, depending if it's $20,000, then, but if it's a reasonable cost, then yeah, I think we should do
As
it.
I always say, you never know until you ask. So
Absolutely.
it's important to ask.
Okay.
And if anyone needs any of this information, just give me a call or come by the office.
And we can put that information out for the public without a problem.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's public information,
Yes.
the audit report.
Yep.
So I want to be clear here. The accusations out there by some people, there was no cover-up.
Not that I can see.
Jeff Tinley, are you still on the call? Jeff Tinley?
I see him still on, but he might have had to step away.
Okay.
Yes,
There he
I'm
is.
here. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Sorry, Jeff. Your opinion on the cover-up?
My opinion is that there was no cover-up, that Dan acted appropriately by finding an anomaly, I'll call it that because I agree we don't know, going to the auditors to do an investigation, reporting that to the Board of Finance, because until in accounting, you're going to find anomalies from time to time. You don't call for an investigation immediately. You try to find out whether there's an explanation. The auditors gave the report. The report was actually delivered at a public session of the Board of Finance and discussed at that public session. And as far as why this is being done at a public session tonight, I would say in particular where there's an allegation of a cover-up, that the remedy for that is to do this in public and say there's nothing being hidden here. It's all out in the open, and there is an explanation for it. It's different than the explanation that some have offered. So I think this is the appropriate thing to do when there's an allegation of a cover-up, and I think facts show that there was no cover-up, that it was handled appropriately, although I agree that it would have been good if it came to the attention of the Board of Selectmen earlier than it did.
Okay. I think we're all set. Dan, thank you as
Thank
always.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Next presentation is the Energy Task Force on a virtual metering. Who would like, Chuck, are you, you're welcome to the mic.
Thank you.
Oh, and you get the pointer.
All right. Here, turn it on. So over the summer, John Michaels asked Tom Connor and I to do a solar cost options study for the purposes of budgeting in October. So if you could go to the, oh, well, let me see if I can.
Is it
Not
working?
quite. No, the click doesn't work. Can you move it for me? Oop. No, it should,
If you, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Mike?
believe if you put this PowerPoint, because it looks like a PowerPoint, on full screen, then the clicker should work.
yeah, it's a PDF. So I was saying hit Control L and that puts it into full screen mode.
Yeah, the one next to where it's at.
All right. Oh, this isn't the most recent deck. I see what's going on.
This is not the most recent deck.
No, I sent the amended one earlier. I just rearranged the slides a little bit. But,
Did you send it to Betsy?
yeah, I did. No, it was yesterday. That's all right. I can work with this. So, over the summer, John Michaels asked Tom Connor and I to do a solar cost study. And as part of that, we reached out to vendors that were in this space as well as other towns that are doing this. And Fred Hurley from Newtown, the Public Works Director, referred to us Chris Whitman, who I hope is still on the phone, to talk to you about this option that Newtown uses to realize virtual net metering credits. They and a number of other towns around the state have been doing this for some time. And what it is it's a solar farm that's located somewhere else in Connecticut. It doesn't have to be in your own location. And it makes use of a very specialized solar incentive so that you can receive the benefits from that solar incentive. It's called virtual net metering. So you might be familiar with net metering. Net metering is a residential analog of this, and you get paid for any excess electricity that your solar panels produce. Eversource pays you back for that. So virtual net metering is a way of realizing the electricity from a solar farm, whether it's in your town or anywhere in the state of Connecticut. It comes to you as a result of a bill credit. So it's really a financial transaction. So as I mentioned, Newtown has been doing this, a number of other towns have been doing it, and we took a look at it, and it really amounts to the quickest payback option that we could make use of as a town. And the reason for that is there's no cash up front. The only thing we would have to do is some of the ancillary costs to do a legal check of the documents, right? Have our counsel weigh in on it and make sure that any documents that we put together are up to snuff. The other thing that is attractive about a solar farm somewhere else in the state is it removes any of that physical location risk. You're not owning the solar farm. Your agreement is just a standard power purchase agreement where you're buying discounted electricity for a fixed rate over 20 years. But you don't have to worry about any planning commission issues or anything else. You don't have to worry about penetrating a cap at our transfer station or anything like that. Now, you can take these credits and you can apply them to up to 5 what they call beneficial accounts. So in our case, we have 1 account per building, so you can apply it to 5 of the town buildings. And that would take care of a healthy portion of our electricity use. And it's really our quickest way forward to realize solar credits. So let me find the next slide I wanted to talk to, which isn't responding now.
And Chuck, I'm here. It's Chris.
Oh, good, Chris, thank you.
I've been here the whole time.
So, well, I can't. If you could, can you scroll up for me? No, more, keep. Yeah, right there, that's good. So the first thing we would have to do is we would have to become eligible to receive these specialized incentives, these virtual net metering solar incentive. And the way you do that is you submit a no cost or application for a virtual net metering credit allocation to Eversource. What this does is this secures our place in the queue. There are already 25 other towns on the waiting list for this. And there's been about 30 towns that have already made use of this besides the ones that want to do this. So, you know, it's obviously a popular program among the municipalities. There are indications, and I'm hearing more and more indications, that the virtual net metering program will be retired pretty shortly. And we think the legislature might, quote, clear the queue, which means they would fully fund the queue prior to retiring the program. So time is of the essence here. If we want to secure a place in the queue, then we should go ahead and submit one of these virtual net metering applications. Again, it's no cost or obligation. Even if we were to be awarded the credit allocation, we would have up to 24 months to decide whether we want to exercise it or not, during which time we could do a lot of due diligence on, you know, the vendor and the credit checks, the vendor checks, all the normal stuff you do to do a due diligence on a program like this. We put the specifics of this up in front of the Energy Task Force, and you know, everybody thought it was a good idea. We gave them the opportunity to talk to Chris. There's quite a body of a workbook that we put together on all the solar cost options, something like a 12-tab Excel worksheet, and we gave that to everybody to take a good close look at, and everybody thought it was a good idea that we go ahead and do this. So if you could advance, I think it's down further to the next slide. No, further down. Still further down. Still further down. Yes, right here. So how would we go about doing this? Well, we would just get a legal review of the two documents that we would need to actualize get ourselves into the queue, which would have a legal review of them. There's an application that has to be filled out with the specifics of the what accounts we want to apply it to, and what the specifics of the grid are, or sorry, the specifics of the solar farm are, because Eversource needs to figure out how they're going to connect the solar farm to their grid. Once the documents are submitted, we're secure on the waiting list, and then, of course, if we get awarded, then we can be going on and doing more due diligence. So, I have several more slides. You've seen me click through them on the results of the solar cost analysis that we did. But what I'd like to do now is just turn it over to Chris, so you can, he'll give you more specifics about the virtual net metering program, and you'll have the opportunity to ask him questions. And then, if we have the time and the appetite for it, we can come back and I can talk you through the rest of the solar cost study.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thank you everyone for your time and your review of this. I've been working with municipalities in Connecticut for since the beginning of this program, which is about 6 years old. In the very beginning, it took some time for municipalities to understand the program, the risks involved, the benefits involved, but ultimately what has now happened is, as Chuck said, about 30 municipalities have participated in it, and about 25 more on the waiting list. So it took 6 years to get the 30 in, and in 6 months, 25 others have stepped up and wanted it. I've worked personally with Plainville, Weston, Westbrook, Stamford, Westport, South Norwalk Electric and Water, Fairfield, among others. Some are doing very large deals, some are doing small deals. But the bottom line on this one is, as he said, it's really a financial transaction that supports the growth of the solar industry in the state of Connecticut. So if you look at the program, the solar facility, I'll correct Chuck on this just briefly, has to be in Eversource territory for you. So it could not be in UI territory. It couldn't be in any of the municipal utilities. It would be in Eversource territory. And it can be any place in Eversource territory that they cover. So many of these facilities are being built up in the northeast corner or the northwest corner of the states where there's a lot of cheaper land and less what I call NIMBY issues with people complaining about having a solar farm next to it. The financial benefits are as follows. You would sign a power purchase agreement with a developer at 9 cents per kilowatt hour, and that would buy you the credits for this. And the credits, as Chuck mentioned, go on the 5 bills. And those credits presently for year 1 are about 14.2 cents. So the differential between the credit that you get, 14.2 cents per kilowatt hour in year 1, and the 9 cents that you're paying the developer is clearly your cost saving. So while this is good for the environment, this is a financial transaction. And when so many of the municipalities, because of COVID and other reasons, are in financial, they're some more than others clearly, but have financial issues, this has become a godsend for them to save, depending on how big the town is, it could be $50,000 a year to $1 million a year. I mean, Stamford, for example, is going to save probably about $700,000 or $800,000 a year on the electricity by what they're doing in the B&M program. Now, the credits do change every 6 months. They are tied into rate 30, which is an Eversource rate for, I believe, small commercial customers. So the B&M credit rates go up, if that rate goes up, if that rate goes down, the credit rates would go down. The credit rates over the last 3 to 4 years varied in year 1 between basically about 13.8 and 16.2. So right now it's kind of in the middle of that. As Chuck mentioned, we are in a kind of a time crunch here because this has been in place, but it keeps filling up. And we've had 3 different times we've had to go back to the legislature and get additional funding. And keep in mind, the funding does not come from the state, but it comes from every ratepayer in the state. It's part of the combined public benefits chart and some of the other programs that are out there that the utility can rate base, is what it comes down to. So, every resident of your community is paying for every V&M facility in the state and vice versa. Savings are good, but the way they've structured this is the rates for the first 2 years go down a little bit. They'll go down to 12, somewhere in the 12s in year 3, and then they stabilize from there. They just use a certain portion of the first 3 years of the P&D transmission, distribution, and demand charges. Now, the reason this is more of a rush is because what we're hearing from the legislature, and this is specifically coming from the Energy and Technology Committee's co-heads, is that they're likely to to increase the amount of availability in the B&M program. What they've been talking about is clearing the waiting list and then potentially shutting the program down thereafter. We're not certain exactly how this would go. It's the legislature, until the bills are passed, I'm not going to speculate on how this is done. But what I will tell you is getting on the waiting list. I will prepare the application based on the data inputs I get from you, and I will have it ready for signature for you to apply. So it doesn't cost you anything. In this instance, I'm going to be very clear with you. I would get paid by the developer for placing this project. So I'm not paid by you, but I've worked with many communities through the process of getting approvals through Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, have gone through all of the decision makers, and I'm here to assist you understand it and get the best deal possible. So with that, I'd like to open up the questions.
So first, one of the things that, as talking this through, I would say that if it's going, I mean, Tom, I'm glad you're on this team, because one of the things we do is if there's a grants over a certain amount of money, we go to the Board of Finance to make sure that the recurring costs. And I think this is a situation where we need to get input from the Board of Finance.
Board of Finance on Monday.
Yeah.
I would agree. I would agree completely. This is a financial transaction at the Board of Finance. Every community I've worked with has done both Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance.
Okay, so that's good. Something else I was going to ask was, what I think I heard was, first thing that came to my mind is, why can't we buy, 3 times what we need? But they're only going to let you buy enough solar power to equal the meters that you're using. Is that in general correct?
Generally correct, but I'll get more specific. They will not let you sell or attain the credits from the kilowatt hours from the solar facility for more than you are using in kilowatt hours at those facilities.
Okay, okay.
But there are other reasons to reduce that somewhat in case your bills reduce in the future through energy efficiency, or you happen to close a facility or something like that. There's reasons to not fully cover your bill.
So,
Tom, if you could do the mic. Sorry. Tom Connors, go ahead.
Yeah, in the, so you don't want to, I mean, one of the ways that you could kind of lose on this contract, again, we're just asking for the option to get the contract, so we can debate this down the line right now. But if we want, once we consider actually getting the contract, suppose we get in the queue and we get permission for it, you wouldn't want to underutilize it. Because if you underutilize it, I mean, there's ways to underutilize it and, not lose value on it, but that's probably the way, the one way you might lose some money on it is by
That's correct.
underutilizing it.
If your bills are not large enough to cover the credits, obviously you're still paying the 9 cents to your developer for the power. If you can't use all the credits, you can run those credits forward, but if it's not a temporary situation, you could be running credits forward for a long, long time. And in that instance, you would probably want to transfer one of the beneficial accounts to another municipality who could use it.
Okay, so you could roll those credits.
You can roll the credits forward for a certain period of time, and then the municipal, what I call the beneficial accounts, could be your accounts or could be any other municipality in the state's account. So you could transfer those credits to Litchfield.
Okay.
Or even to our regional school system.
Which would be a better idea, absolutely.
Okay. We
Your
would
regional
never
school
send the
district.
region any benefit. That's a joke, everybody. It's like, okay, any other selectmen? Jason?
So as I understand it, Solomon Energy is a rep for Alco, which is the developer of the solar farm.
Correct.
Are there other I assume there's other developers out there.
You're absolutely correct on that too.
So if Solomon does the application for us, at no cost, no obligation, once, let's say that's approved, everything's funded, and then we're into this 24-month period where we can evaluate it, do we also have an option to evaluate all the vendors out there, or is there an obligation to Solomon and Alco at that point?
There would not be an obligation to Solomon and Alco at that point. The problem, we've got a chicken and egg problem here, okay? The problem that we have here is the VNF applications are tied to a specific development site, which the developer has. The developer has to have an interconnection application into that site. It has to have site control, and the project is then tied to that site, okay? The two things that Eversource cares about in this instance are the site and the municipality. So obviously you could go out and try to do an RFP for this. The question is whether you get the RFP done before the legislature passes this and clears the waiting list and it leaves you holding the bag. Stanford, for example, put their stuff on the waiting list and then did an RFP afterwards and ended up awarding it to who they put the applications in anyway. The rates that are the developers are all offering for the solar is not that wide of a difference. I've seen between 8 and 11 in my with all the developers, because I'm specifically working with Alco on this one. I work with many of the other developers in the state of Connecticut. And matter of fact, I've handled preparing the RFPs for both on-site and off-site solar for about 6 towns in Connecticut also, where I've directly had fiduciary duties to the towns.
Chris,
And just full information, I'm a former investment banker and a lawyer. That's my background.
Chuck, since there are other firms out there that help with this, I know this was referred from Newtown. Did you give any consideration or look into any other firms, or did you just work with Solomon and Alco from the onset?
This came up late in the process of our solar cost option. We were working also with Davis Hill throughout most of the study, and they're another one of the vendors that have done work in Fairfield and Newtown and a number of others. I think they've done something like 30 installations around the state. They were very helpful to us in understanding all the different solar options, primarily in town, but they didn't have a remote solar option available, at least that they brought forward to us. So once Fred referred Solomon Energy to us, then we began looking exclusively at them, primarily because of the worry about the virtual net metering queue filling up and the need to get at least secure a spot on the queue. So we haven't looked yet at any other remote solar farm vendors.
Mike or Justin, you have any questions? I don't want to forget about you being out there in virtual land.
Thanks, Jeff. No, nothing else from me. I had the question about looking at others I wanted to hear from, but it's been asked and answered. So.
Same here. Nice presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
George, do you have any?
I'll make a comment. There's a Heritage Villager here tonight who, since I can't mention his name, I won't, has suggested that Heritage Village is also interested in virtual net metering. They have an active solar energy team or committee, I don't know what they call it. So I just want to mention that. I have reached out to Region 15, and I don't know, Chris, if you've had any connection with them. Have they contacted you? I suspect not. But they use...
I can tell you it would make your deal a lot easier, because these facilities typically are pretty large. And most of what we are having is beneficial accounts for towns. I'll give you Fairfield, for example, because I'm putting in, we have 1 megawatt already cleared the waiting list, but we're putting in at least 2 and maybe 3 more in the next 2 weeks. They happen to be in UI territory, so they're not really competition for you for this. But of the 15 beneficial accounts we're working with, right now, 12 are schools. The only ones that aren't schools are water pollution, the police station, and their street light.
So I couldn't hear you there, Chris. You said 12 are schools?
12 are schools.
Yeah, they use more
And the
power
other
than we
three
do.
are street lighting, their water pollution control authority, wastewater treatment plant, and the police station.
Okay.
So getting RFP involved would probably be helpful, and it might actually lower your rate a little bit from 9 cents to 8.988, somewhere in that range. Because there's some volume discount involved.
I don't personally have a great connection with anybody in the fiscal office, in the Region 15 system. Maybe someone else could reach out and see if they have an interest. It does seem to make economic sense. I don't know what else they're looking at.
I've reached out to Joe Martino, but he hasn't responded yet. I just sort of think they're overwhelmed. And my, I don't know, my sense with the school is, I think time is of the essence here, and it would be just, you know, we could try what we could try for a week or two, but I sort of feel like once we get the school involved, we're adding 6 months and the whole thing goes away. So.
Well, what we have to recognize here, I think, first of all, is the application process is cost-free and non-binding, okay? That's incredibly important. I wouldn't ask you guys to make decisions real quickly that we're gonna bind you, because you do need to do your diligence. You need to understand the process, the risks, how it's going to work, the whole bit. On the other hand, I am all for getting a free option.
So, I did want to follow on to your question, Emily. We asked Chris for a set of references, and he has furnished them to us. And Dan was just telling me he's starting the process with Fred Hurley over in Newtown tomorrow, finding out what their experience was like with Solomon in Elko.
Yeah, I think I was just trying, you know, as Jason was saying, you know, are there other people? But it seems like we're kind of locked in. That's not usually the process we go about things. So just curious if anyone else was interviewed, or if it seems like you would have gotten to the same conclusion of coming to Solomon anyways.
Yeah, possibly. And, you know, really, normally we would go through the full due diligence before we came here, right? But since this is a no cost obligation way to get ourselves into the queue, we thought it makes sense to come now and then come back later again if we need to, if we are awarded.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, Jeff Tinley.
Yeah, I would just say that I would be available to review whatever needs to be reviewed immediately. And if the board wants to consider it subject to confirmation that it is in fact no obligation and no cost to apply, I would do that right away once I get the documents. And I'd also review whatever other documents there are quickly. I was involved the last time the town looked at a solar project landfill, and one of the differences that I think I see here is that while that was also described as no cost to the town, it involved a long-term contract and commitment to a price for energy, which involved the risk that the town would take. As I understand this net metering, it's said that it guarantees savings, and if that's the case, that would be good as well. So it's a difference from what we looked at the last time we looked at the solar project.
Well, let me make it clear. Guaranteed savings is not anything that anybody in my industry can tell you is going to happen, okay? If electricity rates, rate 30 went down to 3 cents a kilowatt hour for supply plus transmission and distribution, you're going to lose money, okay? Guaranteed savings is not a phrase I would ever use because it's not guaranteed. I can tell you the chances of the rates going down to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, all of us would love to death.
But I think the thing, Jeff, is the real time when we're going to need your time is if the option gets, you know, we get in the queue and then we get the ability to actually, through the state, do this, right? So when we actually go forward and I think there should be some time looking at the get the contract to get in the queue, but I think that's fairly straightforward. It really is an option though, so that
Yeah.
when it comes forward in the future, we still can say no. And at that time too, I'll take you up a lot, or take somebody up a lot on going through the legalese of it in gory detail, okay?
That's very good. I appreciate that, and I understand that what I read about it guaranteeing savings probably isn't true. And I know that the way these things are set up, the sponsor always makes money, and somebody has to watch out for the township.
That's why you need to talk to some of my references and some of the people that have done this, who can tell you that they are saving money and doing quite well.
And Jeff, I don't know if you have any experience in this, but putting my risk management hat back on, another thing we'd want to do is take a good hard credit look at the vendor. And any assistance you could give us there, and that, I can cover off on some of the fundamentals, but the finer points I don't have any experience in. So we'd want to look at the strength of their balance sheet, see how obligated they are, make sure that, they're not headed toward bankruptcy in our estimation.
Right, absolutely.
So
Well,
Jeff,
the one thing I can tell you about this, about the developer is Alco is the long-term owner of these facilities, and Ecos is his development arm. It's basically a team of about 15 or 20 guys, but the owner of the company is a wealthy investment banker who's has an over 9-figure net worth.
So Jeff Tinley, you are suggesting that the board could vote to enter into this no obligation agreement or application pending your review of it? Or would we better to get your review and then call a meeting if it had to be, if it was a special meeting required? What's your?
I think that the fact that it's no obligation should be easily verifiable, and I could do that. And if you wanted to proceed to go forward, subject to my confirmation, I would be comfortable with that. That's up to you, up to you as a board.
Look, I think what we need to do is what I think would be valuable. I like that approach. We can send him the application. It's online. You can look at it. All we do is fill information in boxes, and that's all we do. So you can look at it, and there's details about this. I don't think it would take more than an hour to go through this. But I also want to make sure that we go to the Board of Finance and get their blessing too.
Yeah, there's actually two documents we'd want you to review. One is the application, and there's another one that's a letter of intent.
Correct. The letter of intent part of the application. So.
Oh, okay.
So
And
are
it's a
are
very
you
good
able to
document.
get those to Dan Colton and myself, so Dan can get that to the Board of Finance for tomorrow night's meeting?
Yeah, we have them now. We can give them to you.
Yeah, so, and then I'll also get it to Jeff Tinley for review. And
Aren't
how
these the
time
documents
critical is this?
that we've already sent to you, Dan?
I have
You have them, right?
documents, and they're gonna be up on Monday's Board of Finance meeting.
Okay. So Dan will be able to forward them to Jeff Tinley, copying me on it, and we'll go from there. So,
I'm available at any time to answer questions that you might have. I've done about, I think in service, I've got someplace around 20 megawatts in service. And I've got another 10 megawatts on the waiting list with other towns.
Okay, so what would the board like to do? Would the board like to, approve signing the, what do they call it, agreement, whatever,
The application,
the application pending approval of the Board of Finance and the town attorney?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm comfortable with that as, you know, as long as it's confirmed that it's no cost, no obligation, because otherwise, I think we, you know, I want to know what the commitment is long-term, because then well, we're not spending money now, you're spending money at some point in time, and you run into spending and bidding issues and whatnot. I mean, it sounds, based on the way everything is being discussed tonight, then I'm fine with
Right.
that, subject to,
just so you know,
confirming and whatnot.
right, the developer has to build the system before it goes into service. And the developer has to expend the monies for that. The town, the goal on this one is the only money that the town would ever come out of pocket for, other than for payment of the credit under the agreement, is the legal review associated with the document.
Okay. So, would it be the board like to do that with, because we can, I think in keeping with the spirit of, we apply for grants, doesn't always mean we take the grants until the Board of Finance weighs in on approving that we accept the grant. In other words, sometimes things come up where we have to move to get into the grant. And I think this is a similar situation where, yes, we can apply for the grant because it doesn't cost us anything for the grant. That meaning pending approval by the Board of Finance, because that's part of what we have to, it's in our charter, which is fine. So, I can get the information back from the Board of Finance, but the trouble is, if it's, I don't know how time critical this is, calling a special meeting, or do we just make a resolution to do this pending review by the town attorney and the Board of Finance?
My preference would be to try to do this now if we can. I don't know when this legislation is going to get passed or finalized. I believe that we've got a few weeks at least, but if this extends out 6 to 8 weeks, I'm very worried that we might end up being too late.
Well, I can assure you two things. This board probably will not do anything without the Board of Finance taking a look, and Tom Connors is on the Board of Finance. I'm sure he's looked at this and has the answers for them, and I'm sure they'll probably agree with what his findings are.
You know, and I think the approach that was suggested is the approach I'd love to see. That you approve filing the application subject to town council's, town attorney's review, and Board of Finance approval. That way we just don't have to come back again to you guys once these occur, and I'm subject to, I don't know when the next board meeting's gonna be, unless you guys are really good about special meetings.
That just depends on our workloads and what we're doing. So does the board want to make a motion on this? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that the Board of Selectmen approves the town submitting the application that's been discussed, subject to legal review and review by the Board of Finance, review and approval by the Board of Finance.
And the town attorney.
Right.
Okay, do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second Mike Rosen.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And it passes, and we'll wait to hear from the Board of Finance. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time tonight as it goes on. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll set up now.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, Strategic Plan Commission, Affordable Housing Presentation. Gentlemen, sorry for the hour. Thank you for hanging in there.
First of all, we'd like to thank the board for giving us an opportunity to present one of our 5 priorities. Being a proponent of time management, I have told Catherine Smith and Ron Conti that they need to wrap this up in 20 minutes, including Q&A. So I hope that provides you some motivation and happiness. Thank you. Catherine. You're,
John's good at intros.
Does the clicker work this time?
Are you doing it? Yeah, and then you just click it. There you go.
Very good. You're hired.
Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me okay, or are we good?
Just make sure you
I would
get
make sure you
up
go
to
to the mic so that
microphone,
those who are
otherwise
listening can hear you.
People won't
Okay.
hear you outside.
Good
here.
evening, everybody. So I'm Catherine Smith, and I'm part of the Strategic Plan Commission, so
Closer.
thank you
You're
all
like
for
afraid of the
having us
Thank
here
you.
tonight. We've been working hard on this issue, and we're excited to share our research, our findings, our recommendations, and accomplishments with you all. Okay, so we've been working on this for a while. To give you a little bit of background for those of you who haven't been following this, we've been working with the board for the last several years, really. We had the Strategic Plan Task Force created back in 2017. That group reached out to town leadership, we reached out to business leaders, and we reached out to the community to discuss the vision for the future of Southbury. Within that group, we worked with a consultant group, and we came up with a survey, which was distributed to members of the community. It was made available online, and we had a really large response from the community. We were discussing issues such as community needs, economic growth initiatives, and over 110 ideas were relayed. And so then the board approved the strategic plan, which kind of condensed all those ideas and concepts. And then in 2019, the board created the Strategic Plan Commission, all right? And this commission, which we're a part of, is here to support the board. And we're here to take those 110 initiatives and condense it down and pare it down into 5 at this point, 5 initiatives which the board agreed upon, and that's what we're focusing on right now. So Ron and I are here tonight to talk about affordable housing, the other initiatives, and at some point during the year, I'm hoping that we'll have a chance for everyone to get up and present their ideas here to the board, but we're revisiting the Community Conversations on Aging report. We're looking at enhancing government efficiencies. We're looking at identifying future uses for Southbury Training School, and then also re-looking at the Regional Community Center. I know we've had a lot of discussions about that as well with the pool and whatnot. So tonight we're going to talk about affordable housing. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about what is affordable housing. There's a lot of misconceptions about what affordable housing is, so we're going to break that down. We're also going to talk about compliance with the state of Connecticut, the economic need in Southbury. It's a lot more than one would think. The accomplishments of our group and the initiatives, and then recommendations and next steps. So affordable housing can attract young families, median income families, young adults, and seniors. The new residents will spend money at local businesses, which will bolster our local economy. As we know with COVID, there's a lot of businesses that have been negatively affected. So we want to have residents here, new people here in town, which will shop at our businesses and help our economy. We've also did a white paper on affordable housing, which I think was distributed to everyone here. So if there are any additional questions about things, there's always the white paper as a reference. Okay, so what is affordable housing? Okay, so affordable housing is housing that costs less than 30% or less of the median income. So you don't want to spend more than 30% of your median income for the community on housing, and that includes insurance as well as utilities. You want to still have 70% of your income left for food, for savings, clothing, transportation, that type of thing. Anything more than 30% is considered to be a burden. Now, this 30% is relative to the community. So what that means is for Southbury, for instance, for a family of 4, the annual median income is about $94,000. So 30% of that would be about $28,000. So it means with per month, about $2,300 would be spent on rent or a mortgage, the insurance, and utilities. Any more than that would be a burden. Okay. Comparatively speaking, the town of Waterbury has an annual income, that household income median at about $42,000. So the monthly amount that they would spend on their rent or housing would be only about $1,064. Darien, on the other hand, has an income of about $200-some thousand. So they could use, $5,000 a month on income. So this 30% that we're talking about is relative to the particular community. Okay, so why are we looking at the Affordable Housing Plan? It's been mandated. Okay, so Public Act 17-170 was passed, and it requires that all Connecticut towns prepare and adopt an affordable housing plan by July 2022. This happens to kind of correlate with the amount of time that we're having to put together an update to the POCD. So the Affordable Housing Plan will be its own standalone document. However, it will align with our POCD. Okay, we must identify how the municipality intends to increase the number of affordable housing developments within the town, and we need to update this plan every 5 years. So we've had some discussions before about affordable housing and how we want it to fit with our community. So chances are we want to have incremental development here in town rather than having large developments. We probably want to do it in incremental phases so that just as what we've had in the past, we have a number of units here and there, and we continue to grow the affordable housing, but it's going to be done incrementally. Having a plan allows us to do that. We get to identify what the growth is that we want for our community, where that growth is going to happen. So that's why we're proposing that we create this affordable housing plan so we as a town and the board can manage how this growth occurs. Currently, Southbury only has a housing stock of 1.42% of affordable housing. The state is wanting us to get up to a level of about 10%. However, by having a plan in place, we can plan that growth and move at a pace that Southbury is comfortable with. Okay, I want to now hand the presentation over to Ron, who's going to talk to you guys a little bit more about what's going on in town as far as affordable housing, some of the developments, and then he's also going to talk about the economic need and the initiatives.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ron Conti, and hopefully I don't screw this thing up. Here we go. Many of our service employees, such as retail workers, food workers, service workers, nurses, aides, etc., cannot afford to live in Southbury because they're just not affordable housing present. Okay, according to the Alice report, 39% of Southbury residents are living above the poverty line but below the state cost of living threshold. Over 30% of the population is 65 years or older, and many are living on fixed incomes. Okay, here's a couple of graphs we're going to go through. Okay, this graph shows you that, yeah, sure, come on, Ron. Assisted living income constraints, okay? It's broken down into two things, the 5 comparable towns and the 6 towns bordering Southbury. And as you can see, we have the highest rate of Alice percentage of employee constraints. Let me get to the next one, it's probably better. Okay, this talks about the poverty rate. The poverty rate in Southbury as compared to the 6 bordering towns to Southbury. And this talks about the percentage of homeowners that are paying over 30% of their income. And Southbury has the highest homeowner burden. As you can see, we rank right up there in both the municipalities by size and municipalities of our neighbors. Rental burden. Once again, you'll see that we're high on the burden on renting when compared to the select group where the population was similar to ours in our neighboring towns. Okay. We've obtained and distributed housing plans for multiple communities to this board. The communities like Fairfield, East Lyme, Darien, Salisbury, North Stonington, and Brookfield. Okay, we created a 4-page outline for a housing plan. We researched and prepared the distribution of the white paper. And here's our recommendations. Our recommendations are to prepare an affordable housing plan for the town of Southbury. The Southbury Affordable Housing Plan should include inputs and approval from the Planning and Zoning Commissions, the Board of Selectmen, align with the 2022 updated POCD, and support the creation of affordable housing option for all ages and all income levels. Okay, here's what our next step is. Create an ad hoc affordable housing committee. Research the possible grant funding and apply for state grant opportunities. Prepare a affordable housing plan in conjunction with the POCD. Work with the land use administrator to prepare a request or RFP. Retain a consultant. Hold at least 2 public meetings to discuss the topic of affordable housing. The ad hoc committee should be composed of the following. Representatives from the Board of Selectmen and Finance, Land Use, Southbury Planning Committee, and the Economic Development Committee. Town residents, attorneys, and developers, real estate partners, etc. Let me go to my, it wasn't on the slide, but I'd like to talk about it for a second. Okay. Why is this important? Word is now that the legislature is frustrated that small communities have not come close to achieving the 10% level demanded by the legislature when they passed 3806. The past 2 years, the Planning Commission has approved 2 affordable housing plans. The first one, you will remember, was on Route 172, where the residents, boy, were they mad. The residents came up and they strenuously objected to putting the development in amongst the residential area that they were. They complained that they bought the property for single-use families, and now we were going to put in a development. And this carried on for 2 years. And finally, with the threat of going to the court using the affordable housing statute, we went to the town attorney, I believe. We went to the town attorney, and we were told that we really wouldn't have a case, because the only way you can deny an affordable housing application is for safety and for health. And the developer had already approved water and sewerage, et cetera, from the Pumperug Health District, and the fire marshal had approved the site. So we had no option other than to approve the development on 172. Now, in the meantime, this year, we got another one. again, of quoting the Affordable Housing Act on Old Waterbury Road. So the developers are aware of this, and we've got to decide whether the developers are gonna determine what our town looks like, or are we gonna take action and work so that we could tell the developers where they can put it, because we have a plan. Also, you gotta remember that this is a state law, and those people, those representatives in Hartford, okay, that are displeased with the small towns that are not moving towards that 10% and as fast as they thought they would, are threatening to start pulling some aid from those small towns. So we don't want that to happen also. So that's the end of my presentation. Also, that's the end of our work, because our task was to do the research, make a presentation to the board, and then turn it over to the board for action. We're here for questions.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question. Woodbury recently did a study on their affordable housing situation, and they found, and this is just based on a Rep Am article, I haven't seen the actual study. They found that in Woodbury, actually, if you got rid of the requirement for a deed restriction on the property involved, they had about 15% of their housing inventory could be considered affordable. In my mind, the deed restriction is a real, it's a problem, really, and it doesn't need to be there. And I wonder if we did the same sort of study in Southbury, whether we'd find the same percentage here.
That could be, you could do that, but it still has to be part of your plan. You, the board, have to develop a plan by July of 2022.
No, that's fine. That's all well and good. I'm really talking to the state legislature here and saying, why don't you take that deed restriction bogey off our backs so we can have a more reasonable approach to this, where right now 830G is where the developers come in and they basically stuff it down your throat. You can't stop them.
Yep.
That puts a developer in the town in a very adversarial relationship, which does not do anyone good in the end. Anyway, that's a comment. There's nothing the town can do about it per se. I'm just commenting that this deed restriction takes a lot of housing that is affordable by price out of that calculation.
Well, you see, when I looked into this, we may have an opportunity to have a lot of affordable housing now, because affordable housing doesn't have to be a big development. You can have a commercial enterprise on the bottom, and you can have housing units on the top, and as long as they meet the criteria for criteria for affordable housing, not to exceed 30% of the person's income. That's all well and good. The thing is, you've got to sit down and come up with a plan. And you've got to move the plan to the state, and the state has to approve the plan. And I think it might be Woodbury. I can't remember the town that was applying for a moratorium. You can apply for a moratorium, but you've got to have 2% of your units to be affordable. If you don't have 2% of your units to be affordable, it doesn't work. How do we get, I asked the question, how do we get that 1.42%? Who gave the state those figures? And I was told, I'm going to tell you, I was told that the first selectman's office and the land use people provide those information to the state of Connecticut.
That's true. There's an inventory kept of, when you talk about 830G, that is set by deed, they can't exceed that. That has to be recorded.
Yes.
That's recorded in our land use office.
Yes.
We have an inventory of that, so if anybody asks, we show, because records have to be kept, and the developer has to keep records of which of units that
Affordable.
are in the affordable, that they're being rented, and they have to show that the person renting the affordable falls within that
Yeah.
income level.
And also, it helps the developer because, you know, they can charge up to 50% of the rate because it's based on the person's income level. As the income level, if they become more affordable, the developer can charge more for the unit. The developer on 172.
Ron, correct me, that's Route 67, right? Not,
Yeah, it's Route 67,
Okay,
I'm sorry,
okay,
it's a
okay.
corner of 172 and 67. It's across the street from Grace Meadows,
right.
okay? Well, when he put in that development, as soon as they got word that he had the okay, he had it all sold out. He had it completely filled. So there is a demand. There is a demand for that, you know, affordable housing. And it makes perfect sense to keep our high school and college graduates in town, paying taxes and buying from our local vendors rather than moving to Bethel or some other town where they can afford to live. Is there any questions? I'm that good?
Ron, I know you're on the planning commission. Has this been discussed with the planning commission at all?
Yes, it has been discussed. In fact, it was discussed at the very last meeting. And the idea that you can do it as part of the POCD is wrong. You have to do this plan, and then you have to do the POCD. But the POCD can refer to this plan. This can be part of it. Okay, but we do need a plan. So yes, I have talked to, we're in like a transition phase because Kathy's looked at this when she had it. Okay, and I went to her and she helped me develop this. But there's nobody now to talk to you know, to really develop it.
So I think you answered my second question. Like, we have the POCD coming up. Generally, the town
Yes.
hires a consultant that prepares
Yes.
works closely with the planning commission, land use administrator, and prepares a POCD every 10 years. And I just didn't know to what extent that consultant could be involved with assistance in this process.
I would, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know. I would look for a consultant that had a history of working in this particular area. Now, if that consultant also develops a POCD, which is very likely, you know, you people can work on that, can hire those people.
So to that point, yes. We have had they're later in the agenda is what we're looking at in the land use department, how we may hire the need for both planning, a planner, and a land use administrator. We have RFPs back for a plan of conservation and development, and we're reviewing them. But based on what happens tonight, looking at how we're gonna move ahead with the planning side of it, would determine, because our Naugatuck Valley Council of Government also has written affordable housing plans. They've also done that, and they've also helped municipalities do their plan of conservation and development.
Yeah.
So we're pretty close. After tonight, we should have a direction. I mean, frankly, we thought we had a direction, and then Kathy left. Now we need to find another direction. We've been researching that, so that's kind of what we're, later in the evening, and that will bring on people who have done affordable housing plans for other municipalities in the area, other municipalities in the state, and they've also done plans of conservation and development, and hopefully bring that all together in one piece, doing for the next 2021 to
July 22.
July 22.
You're absolutely right. That's a very good plan, because I heard about that at the last meeting. One thing you got to remember is that, and the consultant will tell you this, that the plan, the POCD is one thing, and the affordable housing plan is another
Yes.
thing. And they've got to be separate, but they can be referred to.
Right. So that would be the next step after we go through this here tonight, and then we're gonna fold that all together, hopefully, as
Great.
we go towards a plan of conservation and development, this will be rolled right in. We'll have a plan in place to do that.
Fantastic. Any other questions?
Anybody out there, Mike? Mike? Justin?
No, I don't have any specific questions. I do want to thank everybody for the work and the patience that they've had, over the course of this. I know that you guys have wanted to get in front of us for a while, and a variety of reasons haven't. I do have some concerns, Jeff, to the point Ron made, and some of the differing points of view in terms of what comes first, and the fact that there needs to be a separate plan here, that there just be clear coordination here, and that we're not duplicating efforts amongst various committees and commissions, but that certainly, I've long been in favor of the town at a minimum meeting our affordable housing requirement for the state, but even more so because I believe it will help improve the overall well-being of the town as a whole. So I'm very grateful to everybody for the work and for tonight's presentation in particular.
Okay. And certainly if we go ahead with a plan for moving ahead in the land use department and a planning side of it, what you've worked with will come up as part of the discussion, enter in with the planning commission, the board of selectmen, and we should be able to move forward. That sounds simple in government, but it took me 6 months to get a roller and paver the first time we got here. So just, I'm like, wow.
We all remember the roller and paver.
But we will certainly, we're actually looking towards that as we speak.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you,
attention.
everybody.
Thank you.
I have one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One last question. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
I'm assuming the planning commission, and you're on the planning commission, would take the lead role in creating an affordable housing plan. Is that a correct assumption, or are we talking about the Board of Selectmen getting involved? I mean,
Well,
I'm
we
not
would,
sure what's been said here.
we would, I'm assuming, and I can't speak for the board because I'm just a member, but I'm assuming that the zoning board would have some input in it, the planning would have some input in it, that, and maybe even planning leads it, I don't know, but that's all to be discussed, like the first selectman said. There's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of plans out there that we could use as a model to work towards what Southbury should look like.
And they've been, a lot of these planners have been through this,
Yes.
so they can guide us quickly than
Yes.
us trying to
Do it on our own.
do it on
You're-
our own. That's the
You're
idea.
100% right.
Okay? Any other questions?
Can I add one thing?
You may.
So one thing, we were talking with Hiram Pack, and what he was mentioning is when we do get the committee together to evaluate the housing plan, put it together, he strongly encouraged us to actually get the naysayers, the people who are objecting to affordable housing, to be part of that, because we want to get those people on board and address their concerns on the front end, rather than have it being held up at a latter point. So try to fold people from the public into it who are strongly opinionated about it, and get their consensus on the front end. So it'll save us a lot of headaches in the long run.
I think in the initial discussions in the first, for a lot of people, to be honest with you, I think it was a feeling that we had to explain that this is not low income.
That's right.
This is affordable, and that's much different than.
Yes.
It's not the end of the world, and I think people have come to understand that much better, especially since some of these buildings that have been done with a formula of affordable housing in it, they're looking at it and saying, well, that's
Pretty
not
nice.
so bad. Okay, so now it's a little better understanding, I think, from the public, so I think we're in a good place here. All right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so next up is the public comment section of our meeting, limited to 2 minutes. I did have one public comment come through. It was through today. I don't, Mike, do you want to read that, Mike? I mean, there was some apprehension that for some reason that the first selectman might read this, I think. I'm not sure. Well, if you'd like to, I can read it.
Let me pull it up.
Whatever you want.
No, I don't think there's apprehension coming. I think the letter, the way I read it, just wasn't sure what
Okay.
the process is for having public comment read into the public record, in this virtual environment.
Okay, so I'll read this in. Public comment is from Michael Carrington, 76 Reservoir Road. As I understand it, residents are still unable to make remote public comments via telephone or online real time. I'll confess that I don't fully understand what the problem is, since the Board of Selectmen meetings did allow remote public comment earlier this year in a live setting. I understand that the technology is fickle and that the systems fail on occasion, but I would strongly encourage the first selectman and the board to fix this process as soon as possible and make free and fair public comments an absolute priority. Having to send an email to a public figure like Mr. Manville to read aloud into the record is a slightly awkward and cumbersome process and robs the message of some of its intended inflection and personality. Moreover, would-be speakers are inherently restricted from altering their comments on the fly. I love written communications as much as the next person, probably more so, but there's simply no substitute for being able to verbally address the community in one's own voice. It is a wonderful part of living in a small New England town like Southbury and a highlight of Board of Selectmen meetings. I would note, COVID remains a public health crisis. Unfortunately, logistical hurdles and new strands of virus threaten our best hopes of a quick recovery, and we will likely be dealing with this until at least the summer. Many of us would like to be able to share our voices while we safely social distance. I would also note that if the town invests the time and energy in a reliable platform for live remote public comments today, this could be a wonderful benefit well beyond the COVID era. Southbury will always be a home for the elderly and disabled, parents with young children, etc. Many folks just have a hard time leaving their homes on Thursday night, and a proper live platform would be a sensible feature for our town going forward to ensure that every resident has an opportunity to participate and actually be heard in the public comment period. Thank you. Okay, is there any other public comments? Would you come forward and give your name? And please limit it.
John Gray, Patriot Road. First quarter 2018, per an independent auditor, 500 gallons of fuel disappears. Second quarter 2018, again, independent auditor, 500 gallons of fuel disappears. In January 2019, the town learns of the ongoing fuel disappearance. And when the town knows that the fuel is actively disappearing for those 3 months, January, February, and March, lo and behold, an additional 200 gallons of fuel disappears again on camera. If we knew the fuel was disappearing in January, why wasn't the video secured in January, February, and March? And now your answer to this problem is to just hit the reset button and say, we are going to be better from now on. Just forget all this theft because we put an end to it. Mission accomplished. A couple of guys resigned from Public Works with their pensions, so let's just ignore it and move on. How can any reasonable person look at these facts and not conclude that there was a cover-up, or at the very least a criminally negligent level of incompetence demonstrated by our first selectman? First, the video is never secured. Why weren't the police called? Because the first thing the police would have done is secure the video. I wonder who was on the video. I wonder if any of those people on the video were friends with Jeff. Second, defying all rational explanation, the thieves are alerted to the fact that they are under suspicion. And magically, the disappearance goes from 500 gallons per quarter to 200. Wow, how'd that happen? And third, when independent auditors uncover the theft and report it, they report it to the first selectman, who never tells the Board of Selectmen. It's never reported at a selectmen's meeting. Instead, it's quietly released to the Board of Finance and then swept under the rug, not to be heard about until 2021. This was a theft involving tens of perpetrators, and everyone in this room knows it, including you, Jeff. You know some of the people who've stolen fuel. I haven't seen anyone arrested or
That is
anyone
2
agreeing
minutes.
to reimburse the
That
town
is
for
2
what they
minutes,
took.
sir. Thank you.
Taxpayers want
Thank you.
answers.
Any other public comment? Mr. Ruggiero? Good.
Joe Ruggiero, 245 Skyview Drive. I noticed tonight that you were highlighting a memo from Town Attorney Jeff Tinley regarding voting and abstention. I wasn't sure if you were going to actually, it was going to be discussed at any length tonight, but I think it's important to mention his findings that everyone should read them, if you haven't already. I just wanted to make 2 quick points. I think, one, I would hope that Mr. Tinley's letter could be shared with other boards, committees, and commissions in town to make sure they understand the details concerning voting and abstention, and particularly what is a reasonable cause for abstention. 2, I didn't see it specifically in his advice, but I do believe that a member of any board, committee, or commission would be correct in abstaining from a vote approving minutes of a prior meeting of their group in which they did not attend. It seemed to me a valid reason that really wasn't highlighted. I know there's been some contention here more recently about what this board can and should decide as needed basis for federal, state, and outside local events, and whether they rise to the level of consideration for a resolution or a statement. That's where this board feels it's necessary to be recorded as a matter. In addition, each member can decide by voting yea or nay or abstaining as they see fit on matters such as these. If a resident doesn't agree with how a member of the Board of Selectmen voted or didn't vote, then they can participate in an election in the future and determine if that member would continue on the board. Mr. Tinley's letter highlights some of that too. But I appreciate the comments that he made, and I just wanted to highlight them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll go on to announcements and correspondence in front of you. Next is and F is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Can I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Mike.
Any discussion on the consent agenda?
Jeff, I'd like to make a motion to remove item F3B, the job description of the transportation coordinator, as this was not provided in the meeting materials.
I missed it too.
I had a similar comment. I also didn't see the Public Works one either, though, but I may have.
That was
missed
sent
it.
out on Monday.
Was that
It
in
was a separate email, I think.
No,
Yeah.
it was sent out with the original agenda on Monday, but the transportation coordinator was never provided.
I see it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there, can I,
Do we
is
have
there
the,
a timing issue on the transportation coordinator? Like, what are our plans on that?
we want to get the approval of the we tweaked the job description for the transportation coordinator based on approval by the Board of Selectmen here of that description, that it's approved, that we're going to go out for the transportation coordinator.
Could we put, so as not to delay that, because I know that's been an issue over there, could we, unless it's okay to delay it 2 weeks,
Well,
if
let
it's
me-
available, can we circulate it and maybe take a recess later and everyone can take 5 minutes and review it?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. All right, so, wait a minute, so we have a motion on the consent agenda, made and seconded, and we're in discussion. So from a procedural, side, we are looking to take out from the consent agenda, which one, Emily, was it?
F3B.
I'm sorry?
F3B.
F?
3B, transportation, job description of the transportation coordinator.
F3B. Okay, so the motion, do we have a second?
What is the motion?
To remove item F3B from the consent agenda as it
From
was
the
not
consent
provided in
agenda.
the meeting materials.
So this is like a modification of the previous motion.
To amend the motion.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion on that?
Can we move it? Instead of just removing it, can we move it to new business? Because I know that the members of the Senior Services Commission and their director are eager to see this position noticed.
Yes. So let's move it to new business.
So I'll amend
Yeah.
the motion to move it from the consent agenda to new business.
Okay.
And we'll take, with the understanding that we're gonna take a recess to review it.
I'll second the amended motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Okay. Okay. So the motion to accept the consent agenda less the transportation coordinator job description. Any other discussion on it?
Do we, just as a question, do we also want to do this for the Director of Public Works? Or Jason, are you going to abstain on that portion since you didn't remove it? Or would you like us to move that as well?
That's good. I just read through it, like I'm comfortable with it, but since we're gonna take that recess anyways, why don't we do that?
So I'll also make a motion to move item F3A from the consent agenda to new business.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? And it carries. Okay. All right, so the motion to accept the rest of the consent agenda, the balance of it? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Next on the agenda is for land use referral, lifting, recommendation to lift the guide rail moratorium.
Point of order, that's under the consent agenda.
Oh, that's under it, sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, it's early. Okay. Item G, minutes of January 14th, 21st, January 14th, January 21st, January 21st, 2 specials and 1 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve all 3 minutes as written.
I'll second.
Made and second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, and it carries. Unfinished business employee handbook. Can I have a,
Motion to approve the employee handbook as presented?
can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition, any abstentions, and it carries. Under unintervenor status, Connecticut, do you have the resolution, Betsy? Okay.
Was this sent out? I don't recall.
I don't recall
that.
seeing this.
There it is.
There was a lot of stuff for this meeting, I gotta say.
That's how I missed the others, like 15 attachments.
Okay,
Well, and it was
This-
weird because the Public Works one wasn't on the agenda yet, but then it was sent out. That's where I think it got you.
okay, can we have the, oh, sorry. So, actually, we have, our attorney, town attorney has been starting the process of working on this. I didn't expect that the board would, not approve this, but we're looking for, motion, that the Board of Selectmen approves entering into intervenor status regarding the Heritage Village Heritage Water Company's request for a rate increase. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a
I'll
second? Who made the second?
Mike Rosen?
Mike, thank you. Any discussion on entering into intervenor status, this resolution? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? And it carries. Okay. Next is the discussion on restructuring of land use. We're obviously ran into, we thought we had this nailed down. We lost our land use administrator. So we put some heads together. It was a group of people who were looking at the applications, and we started talking about what kind of alternatives we may want to look at. So what we figured out, we knew that, but we found that the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments offers services of planning services for municipalities as part of their offering. So we looked into it. Jeff Tinley was involved in it as far as the contracts, what it looked like, what we thought. And the group came to those. There were people on the group were questioning whether it would really work. And what we discovered is that COG has different disciplines, planning disciplines available that, like they specialize in transportation, they specialize in different aspects of planning that would be available. So this is what came up with. The board, I think the board has seen all this, right? This idea.
This wasn't included with the meeting materials, if that's what you're referring to.
Really?
Correct.
No,
Yeah, I didn't see this. No.
I didn't see this.
All right. I would ask that if, after the meeting, if individual board members will contact me.
I thought I saw this somewhere.
No.
Well, you're on it.
You're right.
Your name's on it,
You wrote
George.
Oh, yeah, that's what I saw.
It's from you, George.
You were part of it, George. You should have seen it.
I hope you've seen it.
I hope.
Okay,
I'm
but
more
it
concerned if
wasn't
you
sent,
didn't see
it
it.
wasn't sent to the entire board, okay.
No.
I just
Right.
assumed everybody got it.
All right,
Sorry.
so, Claire, will you come up and if you could speak to this idea of what we've been looking at with this, and the discussions with COG?
Yeah, so we have been meeting with NBCOG and talking to them about their planning services that they provide. They are currently providing services to Seymour and are willing to provide it to us as well. So we would have a designated planner come 2 days a week on average. If we needed more time, they're flexible with that, and provide the planning services. And we would promote Jessica, the current zoning enforcement officer, to interim land use administrator, and she would gain the experience over the next couple of years. She wants to get her AICP certification, so the planner would be there to help her and kind of teach her, show her the ropes so she can learn and move fully into the role. So that was kind of our plan, and wanted to see what the board thought about that. We looked at the different options and thought that this was the best route.
So one of the things we were looking at here is what I'm trying to achieve is to stabilize the planning side of our third floor. And if we were to go to a contract with COG, number one, we can get out of it. I think we can,
It's like 90 days.
90 day, you can get out of the contract. You should want to. The second thing is, we're looking at 14 hours a week of planning use. We don't use a lot of planning. We use administrative work, but a lot of the planning work is really not 5 days a week. By doing this, they also said that should you need more time, not on a every week for 6 months. But if you should need more time or more discipline, they will just provide that kind of like as part of what they do. It's not like, well, you know, sorry, Jason, but not like an attorney says, oh, you're out of time. No. They're just, so it would also give it would also give COG, because of the relationship and the permanent relationship that is anticipated with COG, one of the concerns was always, do they understand, does the planner, if we hired a planner, do they understand Southbury? And if it changes planners or a new planner comes in, do they still understand Southbury? Now, we could hire a planner, but we don't know if the next planner is going to understand Southbury. But COG would have a better understanding because we work with them in a regional basis. And this would stabilize our planning side of the land use administration on that side. And it does fit in within the budget. So this would give an opportunity, and then if we find we need more time or less time on a permanent basis, it could be expanded or contracted. But we felt that 2 days a week was not a bad, and they have done plans of conservation and development, and they have also done affordable housing plans. So we looked at this and said, you know, this looks like, and it does fit within our budget as it stands. Jason, you look like you have a question.
No, I do. Do they provide a dedicated planner
Yes,
for the town?
yes, they do. But they also have other specialized planners if we needed to pull on them too. But we would have one person.
Okay.
Designated,
And is that
yes.
person present in town hall for those 2 days?
They can be. We can work that out. They can be here all the time. They can work some remotely. It's a discussion we still have to have with them.
And is it like an hours thing where it's, you know, 14 hours a week as needed, or is it like Tuesdays and Thursdays we have a planner? Like,
I think the intent is that 2 days a week, and it probably would set a schedule that would be like Monday and Tuesday, or Wednesday or Thursday. The one thing that I was concerned with was like, oh, now what if some big plan comes in and we need more planning time, you know, more hours? I think they said, well, that's not a problem because it's part of, you know, the person's salary. If they have to work to get the job done, they will work to get the job done. They don't want us to say every week you need 3 or 4 days, but it's understandable. They understand that there's going to come a time when something's going to come in. So I'm kind of looking, you know, would they be here in town hall if we request them, or we say, well, we need you to go to meetings because the planner, they can present what they know and can be put to the meetings, but if needed to have the planner actually there, of course, we can either do remote or have them come in to the commission. So it gives us the flexibility. Any other questions?
How is the determination made for it to be 2 days? I'm just concerned that here we go having, especially as we just talked about, you know, POCD, and that's going to end up being a lot of weeks where they're going to have to be working. How do we determine that 2 days is enough? And if we need to go for an extended period of time, you know, say 3, 4, 5, 6 months, what happens then? They're saying, don't do that to us, but maybe we need that. We have this job full time right now. So how do we feel like it's going to give the entire position the same amount of time and energy and attention if we're reducing it?
So again, this was what we were, when we also realized they have done plans of conservation and development. We've had RFPs come in. If this is the direction that we go with this, then we would talk to the COG about what it would cost, what it may cost for them to do it would be above the 2 days a week. It would be, we need you to work on it. Like if they said, okay, we would do your plan of conservation and development, it should be about an additional $100 or $100,000. then we would enter into an agreement with them. We have RFPs. The question is, do we take the RFPs and let them run and still stay with our COG at the 14 hours? Or do we go to the COG and have them do the plan of conservation development and the affordable housing plan together? It would be additional cost, but we have money in the budget for that additional cost built in.
But it sounds like we don't know what that additional cost is at this point.
We know what the RFPs are.
But we don't know what all the additional costs are. So we could end up paying 3 times as much for this versus having a full-time land use administrator.
Honestly, our planning needs right now, we've kind of done an analysis of them, and even though the POCD is coming up, there is not that much planning that you would need more than 2 days a week, on average. The POCD, we're either going to hire a firm, or NBCOG has also come up as an option to have them fully do it. But I mean, if we need more help with that, I'm sure NBCOG is pretty reasonable. I really don't think it would be that much of an issue, especially because the planning that we do need is not so extensive. It would go over 2 days, I don't think often at all.
And how many employees do they have that are available for this? We're saying we'll have one person specific to Southbury, but I assume if they're only working 2 days a week that they'll also be working with other towns. What if when we need them, they're not available? How many other employees do they have, and what if they're not available?
I think
Well,
they
we
have
met
over
with
a
at least
dozen.
3, yeah, they have a lot, yeah.
I don't
Pretty
know,
big
that's why I'm
staff.
asking the
They
question.
have, George, you were on that, they have quite a few
Yeah.
planners on there that do other work for the COG, so they would pick that up with distributing that need to the other planners, and some of them specialize on certain aspects of planning. So it actually works more kind of efficiently, because if you're working on a plan of conservation, if you're working on affordable housing plan, there's probably a planner who has worked on the affordable housing plans and not that the other planners can't do it. What COG is looking for when they put somebody on, they need to know they have a commitment of whatever part of that salary you're committing to. So if we commit to 2 days, and another municipality has 2 days, and then there's other work for that planner to do in other areas of COG, they kind of spread the work out, and they know that they have, basically they're looking to make sure they have enough to carry the salary going forward with that kind of a commitment. And they do this for the town of Seymour.
Yeah.
Seymour has used this. This is how they do it. And I actually had heard that, so that's why I was very interested in how this would work out.
So do we know an actual number of how many employees that they have in this specific
I mean,
capacity?
I can find out. We met with a couple of them. I can find out that for you and let you know, but I know they have a fair amount of people on staff.
COG decided to offer these services to smaller towns because frankly, smaller towns just don't have the workload in heavy-duty planning that justifies a full-time employee that's expert in that. So they try to help the smaller towns like us to get a good planner without actually having to pay top dollar to have somebody on staff when frankly they don't really have that kind of workload. The workload in planning is really more land use administration from what we learned in this little task force. And that's why we want to hire a full-time land use administrator, and the proposal is to promote Jessica into that role, and perhaps she will grow into a full-time a planning ability person as well down the road, but that, we'll see how that plan plays out.
But if the idea is that we want to have a full-time person, then why not go out and try and find a full-time person right now?
Well, we think Jessica honestly is the right fit, and she's willing to do the work and learn, and she's proven herself during her time here in Southbury, and she's actually from Southbury, so we feel like she'll be able to grow into this role and learn and develop and be the right fit for the town.
There just isn't full-time planning work there. The land use administrator, in time could learn enough about planning perhaps that maybe we don't need the NVCOG component. As far as the POCD and affordable housing plans, especially POCD, that almost has to be done as a separate project. It's a big project. You're not going to hire a part-time planner for 2 days a week and expect them to do, you know, the routine planning activities plus the POCD. And I believe, I haven't seen the numbers, but there is an RFP out that's been responded to. So you have some costs from people like Malone and McBroom, and we could throw NVCOG into the mix as well and have them estimated. And they did show us POCDs that they did for other towns, you know, doing a quick read on them. They look reasonable, they're detailed. But I think you gotta take the POCD part out of the routine planning part of the job. It's just, it's a special thing. We do it every 10 years? I don't know.
10 years.
10 years, yeah.
We always hire a consultant and we reserve for it.
Yeah, exactly. You can't assume that you're gonna hire a planner that's gonna do the POCD.
Even if we hired a full-time planner who was the administrator, they could not
They wouldn't have the time.
single-handedly, I mean, because this was reserved for, even when Dolores Curtis was there, to do the POCD when it came due, because there's no way to do both jobs as administrator, and unless you had just a planner. This is what we're finding, is that a lot of people who are planners, they want to do the planning side, not the administrative side. And there's people who can do the administrative side of land use without a problem, but don't have the planning education background, because once they become, you know, it's difficult to find planners today. We were fortunate Dolores grew up, so to speak, into the job as it developed, which is a great idea, because they're very, if a land use administrator is intimate with how the town operates and what the regulations are, and has backup with a planner, it can work very well. And the beauty of this is it all fits into the budget.
I guess I'd like to see two things. Can this be sent to the board? And then is there potential to do a markup, potential projected cost analysis of what this will cost us versus having a full-time land use administrator?
We have that. Dan?
Can that be sent to the board?
Yeah, I can send it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, my hope was that this idea would be acceptable to the board, and I could use this sooner than later.
Everybody on the task force agrees with what's written here. And we all had the same questions. I mean, we all had the same questions that you're having, and having gone through it all, it makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense for us to hire somebody with planning, full bore planning credentials, and then have them do 90% of their work as a land use administrator, which is truly just administrative work. And for the little piece that you need for true planning, it's not a full-time requirement. So it does make sense to hire something through COG to handle that, and not try to put that expense, because you're gonna hire a much more expensive person to be a full-time planner, believe me.
And that very well may be. I think my perspective is just, this is a big decision. It's not something we've done before. Would love to see all of the materials to make that decision on my own before we make a vote on it. It's
Mr.
unfortunate
Chairman?
that this wasn't included in the meeting materials.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I actually, you know, I concur with Selectman Harrison, you know, that I'd also like a little more time to be able to review the analysis that was done. But I'd also suggest there's an urgency here. I certainly would be willing to have a special meeting early next week. Perhaps we also we have questions we'd like to ask of the Nogatuk Valley COG in terms of the process of how this would work. We could send them to you, get them answered, come back Tuesday or Wednesday next week, have the answers to any of those questions we might have put forth in terms of the process, the availability, and then vote.
I think that's a good idea, Mike.
And we lose 3 or 4 days maybe in terms of the whole time
Yeah,
of business.
Jason?
I just had a question. We posted this job, right, like a couple months ago, and didn't we have an issue with applicants? Or
Essentially,
how far did we get in that hiring
I
process?
forget the number, but it,
We didn't get too many applications. We didn't move forward with interviews.
and we didn't move forward. The group, the group that was going to look at and determine which ones we interviewed and whatever, when it was, Betsy, can you scroll to who's on it? So it was myself, Hugh Sullivan, Don Antilla, Jeff Tinley, and George Bertram. And, you know, obviously Hugh Sullivan, Don Antilla are two people heavily involved in, Don Antilla was on planning for quite, and Don Antilla was actually skeptical in the beginning. And after explaining it all, he was like, this will work. When we looked at the applicants that came through, this group was less than enthusiastic about what was there. I mean, it was really, let me just say, it was less than enthusiastic about what was there, the qualifications, and what would we be getting if we did this. And that's when we started talking amongst the group about what would be our options, what would be a way to go, and the suggestion was COG, Seymour does it this way, others do it this way. And my concern again was people come and people go. We talk about institutional knowledge, we talk about people who understand Southbury as it changes. How do we stabilize that planning, that important, not, land use administrator administrates the land use. That is pretty much it. But how do we stabilize the planning aspect of our town? And how do we get that, if, you know, if we have one person and they leave, we're back to the same situation. This, with this concept, with COG holding multiple people who have been involved, planners who have been involved with Southbury, if someone were to leave COG, there'd be another planner who already understands, has had some knowledge of our town and the way it operates. And the COGs do know, one of the people at COG, not one of the planners, said, I know Southbury very well. I can tell you, I know, you know, knew all about the town. So this is a good way to stabilize the planning side of our third floor land use. Versus, even if we were to hire a full-time planner, what do we do if a year or 2 or 3 or 5 down the road they leave? Then we're looking again for how do we get a planner in that understands Southbury. And I think we were a little spoiled, I think we were a lot spoiled with having Dolores here.
Mr. Chairman?
Mike?
You know what, I will say, you know, I don't have a problem with in theory, I think this could make sense. I would just like more than, you know, this discussion to consider it. So again, I'd make the recommendation of giving us some time. If we have questions we'd like answered, you'll give you a couple days and meet next Tuesday or Wednesday to make a decision. But the other thing I will say I like very much about this recommendation is the idea of giving Jessica Townsend the opportunity to grow and growing from within, which I'm a fan of. You know, I think that's a very smart approach. The question I think we also should answer is, you know, that we should look at is, you know, you talk about wanting to bring stability beyond the fact that, yeah, we had someone there for a long time, is why have we had some instability? Is our compensation structure not correct? Are there other HR related issues that are making it an environment where someone wants to stay and grow and, you know, as the town, with the town. So I just think that's another thing to look at as we look at sort of lessons learned. But I'm in theory in favor of this. I just want a day, frankly, a day or two to consider it and to look at the fiscal analysis.
So Mike, I will say, you know, one of the things we have, as I said earlier, and I think that may have been part of, you know, someone was here and then they had left. again, planners like to plan, not administrate. That's what they went to school for, that's what they know. So when it may be that that's part of the problem is hiring a planner, they're like, okay, how much planning am I doing? Or is it mostly, I'm just making sure administratively things are done correctly? You know, that's kind of what I think some of the problem is. And again, planners plan, administrators administrate. We had someone who was wonderful at both because they grew up in it. How do we find that now? I think a lot of the bigger municipalities, they have planning departments and that's all they do is plan. You know.
No, that's fair enough. Fair enough.
Jason-
And I think,
Go ahead.
you know, the one thing we may want to ask of, was there an exit interview done with Kathy just about, about some of her reasons to get some of that, anecdotal confirmation, for lack of a better phrase?
There was, but I think it's not something you want to talk about in public, frankly.
Okay.
But I think that point, Mike, is valid, and
Yeah,
perhaps
that's
we
my
can meet
point,
in
yeah.
executive session to review it and make an analysis and have that be a part of this discussion.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay. I have nothing else.
I just had a couple of questions that I think can be answered based on the information we have right now. I guess one for George, the sense of this committee, was the sense that this was the sort of best way to do this, or was the sense that, let's try this because we can't find the ideal candidate, but our preference would be to have a full-time administrator who's the better candidate?
No, it's your first option, really. We didn't start with this in mind at all. We started with option, the option of hiring another Dolores. And I think Hugh Sullivan really broke the ice by saying that's really not the person that you want, because frankly, it's not a full-time planning job. It's 90% land use administration, and that's a different skill set, a different talent level than what a planner is. It's like two different things, and you're trying to mash them together. And like Jeff said, we had Dolores in there for years, and she did that. She kind of grew up in the town, and she grew up with both skill sets. That kind of person is hard to find. And I think this is a more logical approach, but it isn't the way we started. We started looking for a new Dolores, and we went through a lot of thinking, and I don't know, I guess Jeff, you threw in the NV-COG option, and that it just all seemed to fall together based on the evolution of the ideas.
I would say there was a number of people who were apprehensive about,
I can imagine.
like, well, I can tell you this, Don Antilla was like, no, this is not, we need, then once we talked with COG, and Rick Dunn and John DiCarlo talked to us and explained the program, it's kind of like, and we were really, what we really liked about it was that we had because we were part of the COG's planning group, and we had someone assigned to help 2 days a week, we would also get the benefit of having those who have specialties in certain areas such as traffic, certain areas such as solar power. There's some that have more understanding of that side of it. So we're actually getting some specialty people that if you hired your own planner, I would say it's kind of like going to a firm that says, okay, we have an attorney that does this, but if you should need the services of somebody who specializes in this area, they're there, and they understand the problem and can give you the information to the attorney that's working for you. So this is kind of the concept of when this, as it developed, and when I looked further and further, we looked further and further into it, it was like, this makes more and more sense. And then Don Antilla sent emails saying, this will work, and it seems better than if we were to even, if you could get the full-time planner that does land use administration and has the qualifications, but in this day and age, that's a very difficult thing to find in one. I mean, we, frankly, we're spoiled.
I think,
So then, what are the next steps? Like, I assume we need to enter into a contract with NVCog that we would have to.
Which Jeff Tinley has already reviewed.
And he's redlined it, but I don't think they've agreed to the changes.
I think, I'm not sure if Jeff Tinley's still on, but I think, did they agree to the changes?
They didn't want to have their lawyer review yet because we hadn't agreed to enter into the
Yeah,
contract.
yeah,
So
okay.
once we agree, then we'll figure out all the legal
So I think,
contract.
I think we would have to, I think we'd have to see the contract that we're entering into. And then what's the timing? Is there like an immediate need that, I've heard there's a lot of
We
administrative stuff.
have
not like
somebody
planning
who's,
going on, like,
who is keeping the third floor together, and we need to get this fixed.
Yeah, our
Because,
biggest thing is we need to promote her because we need to hire a new zoning enforcement officer. There's not enough help up there, even before the planning services.
Yeah, this isn't something that can wait another like 3 weeks or so. I think it needs to be done sooner.
well, I think that's where we say we have the special meeting, but give the contract, the financials, all the materials that weren't provided so that we can take the time to review. Because I know it's 10:15 and I'm probably not operating at full capacity, but I'm thinking of other things are popping in my head, like we're only getting them 2 days a week. How does that account for our zoning board of zoning or planning or various meetings where our land use officer used to attend? Does that count against our 2 days? And I'm sure more things
yeah,
will come
that
up.
would
We
count-
don't,
That would be towards the 14 hours, so this is
so then we
part of-
really lose a lot of time some weeks.
Well, this is of course the 2 days, which is what we're anticipating now. Could you add more days if you felt there was a bigger need? Like, oh, hey, and again, they said to us, if you have to attend one planning meeting and it's an extra hour during the week, we're gonna make that work, is what they said to us. We're not gonna say, sorry, that's towards your, click, sorry. They don't do that. They say, okay, but by the same token, there's gonna be, they don't clock the hours, except they're available 2 days a week. They can be here 2 days a week. They can remote in 2 days a week, which is becoming more and more. But if they had a planning meeting 1 day a month that it was required, where a situation where they were required to be there because they wanted the planner there, then it's like, okay, and then, I'm not talking every month, but every 2 or 3 months, they would be there. It's pretty flexible.
But that's something I would want to see in a contract, and to Jason's point, we haven't seen the contract.
Well, they're not gonna spell out a contract. You shall, as if, what COG said to us is, it's 2 days a week, and if something comes up, I think that's how they put it. If something comes up where it's an extra,
Yeah.
whatever, because,
Honestly, I don't think that'll happen too much
yeah.
with our needs.
And we're basing this, a lot of this is, we're looking at how much we've been using. Kathy Castaneda has been helping, when we need planning side, we've been sending it to her, and
Yeah.
she's been doing it. The problem is I need to know we have an agreement and a contract with someone that we can depend on.
Yeah, Kathy does planning for us right now, and she only works a few hours a week. It's not too much. And she's
I don't think
handling
anybody's
everything, yeah.
arguing if this is the best idea or everything. It's just, it's a big decision, like time to really consider it.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes,
make a comment, with regard to the contract, the changes that I was suggesting were not major changes, and I think we should bear in mind that this is a 90-day commitment because it's a 90-day out, and it's a contract with an organization that's not going to take us to court if we want to get out. They're friends of ours, so I think we can relax a little bit of contract.
I guess I missed that as part of the discussion. This is it's a 90-day contract?
no, 90
No,
day
It's
out.
90-day notice to terminate.
90-day notice to terminate.
And they said
Not
that
happy,
they would let
we-
it go
yeah.
sooner if need be. They're not
Yes.
gonna
So
take
we
us
can
to the
terminate at
court.
any time for any reason, as long as we give 90 days notice.
Right.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of it, is so if we get 6 months into this and we say, geez, it's not working, we're not happy with this, and we can give them a 90-day notice on the contract, and we can get back out of it. So, but what I'm understanding is that, you know, so it's not like we're locked into a permanent yearly annual contract. COG was not concerned at all about not being happy with it. I mean, they were like, if you don't, you can get out.
Is the immediate need more entering this contract, or is the immediate need more the elevation of the enforcement officer to the interim position?
I would say the immediate need is to name Jessica Townsend to the interim and backfill the zoning enforcement officer's position, because the workload is, doing both is just too much.
Sounds like Kathy Castaneda is handling the limited planning work that we're needing now, so she's doing that even without COG. COG would be a replacement for Kathy because frankly, she doesn't want to keep doing it much longer.
Yeah,
from
so I
what
mean,
she
we
said.
could wait longer on the COG, but that is the more urgent need to promote Jess and get her help up there.
So if we could, it would be not, I would like to have the board okay naming Jess Townsend interim land use administrator. And then that gives the opening for me to go out to look for the zoning enforcement officer. And that will start the process of taking the pressure off the third floor. And then with that, I think what you're hearing here is you're just looking to see this contract. And before we move into contract, we'll be okay.
So
I think-
if we, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say quickly, I think that points to all the more reason to kind of table this for today, get all the materials out, set a special meeting, can accomplish both of those things in that special meeting, potentially, and keep things moving forward if we do that next week.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. I was just gonna say, if we were to elevate the enforcement officer tonight, right? So that person's elevated, it now gives you an ability to notice a position. That person's not being elevated to land use administrator, that person's being elevated to interim land use administrator. And once we get all the data and you come back to us with a hire for the enforcement officer and all that, we could decide, you know what? That's not the way we want to go. Like, there's no obligation to keep us in that scenario. Like, we could always still decide in 2 weeks, hey, let's have a, you know what, we don't like this idea, go, I don't think it's going that way, but,
No.
We don't like this idea, let's go hire a full-time, land use administrator. So, to relieve the pressure on you guys, personally, I think we could do that elevation now, and it doesn't really affect any of these other things. But I understand if other people have concerns, I'm thinking about it practically and logistically, and I'm not sure that impacts our final decision in any way. We're not limiting ourselves, we're not tying our hands.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mike?
The only question I'd have there is what I want to make sure we are is fair to the current person who we're considering giving the interim title to. What I don't want us to do is make a decision today to give the interim title to, and then a week later after we reveal this stuff, say, you know what? We don't think this is the right approach, and we're going to take that away and change, I just don't see why we couldn't have this conversation on Tuesday,
I feel the same way.
Monday even. And tackle it all at once, make an informed decision. Unless your plan was tomorrow that you were going to move forward and start this process of posting, I think I can meet Monday. And that gives us enough time, so long as we get the information tomorrow. We'll look at stuff over the weekend. Monday we'll get together for half an hour, have a discussion, and move forward.
Okay, so what we'll do is, we will post tomorrow for a special meeting on Monday, for approval of this concept, going forward.
And you'll be able to
And-
send us tomorrow the contract and whatever other material.
Hopefully
Financial
Betsy will be able to get all the
analysis,
contracts and all this stuff.
I guess we have to look at Betsy.
I guess it'll be a red line contract. Will it be that or the original?
Fine.
Jeff Tinley, will that be the original contract, or what are we doing?
Well, they did not get back to me on the changes, so we can either one. As I said, the changes are not significant to me.
I could send both. I'll send the original and then Jeff Tinley, I'll send your red line version.
Okay.
Because even if we don't hear by Monday, we could always, if we decide we want to move forward, we could say, you know, pending approval and review by town council, so.
Okay, so that's what we'll do for,
So can I make a motion to postpone this matter to the next meeting? Whether it be a special meeting on Monday.
to the special meeting on Monday. So we'll notice a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen for this matter.
Second.
Motion's made, can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it carries. We'll be meeting on Monday. We'll set the time tomorrow.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Did you send out the job descriptions? Okay. Take a recess.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a recess now as we get into new business? Because these items we put on new business, so
Now we have to, and Betsy can't send them from here. She has
she
to
needs
go
to go
into
to the
that.
office.
Okay, well, I need a motion to go into recess for 10 minutes.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.